the live stream to everybody, and welcome to the community board meeting for Monday, the 15th of August. Can I get Ruben to open with a karakia, please?
Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mākina kina ki uta, kia mātaratara ki tai, e hi ake ana te atakura, e tio, e huka, e hauhu, tihei, mauri.
Thank you. Welcome again, everybody. Now, I haven't received any apologies, but I have got a few board members coming in via Zoom this morning. Declarations of interest. I am happy to take those throughout the meeting. And to confirmation of previous minutes. If there's no issues there, I'll ask for a mover and a seconder. That's a Tyrone moved. Ruben seconded. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. That's carried. Thank you. Right, into public forum this morning. Now we have got a couple of people here to present. So first up, I've got Adriana. Welcome back to the table.
Thanks. Should I leave this on?
It's whatever you're comfortable with. Okay.
Like they're not going to be able to hear me.
He's good.
Yeah.
I think, Madam Chair, I think they've got louder for you. I'm just saying.
Thanks for having me back. I'm here to talk to you guys about my business, Aquapave Permeable Concrete. And a few things you may not know about me. I got my bachelor in engineering from Western Michigan University. I did my master here in urban resilience and renewal at the University of Canterbury. And to my knowledge, I'm the only NRMCA certified permeable concrete contractor in the country. So that's permeable concrete. We've got a pretty spectacular infiltration rate at 22,000 millimeters an hour, and that's a ASTM 1701 infiltration test. So we use that to make sure that we're passing QC when it's manufactured, because we know that over time it's going to plug up with like grass and soil, but all of that organic debris still has some degree of permeability. So we expect it to reduce by 95% over a period of 9 years, but you're still left with like 1,000 millimeters an hour if you start with a high enough infiltration rate. So a few facts about it. We've got a native bacteria that grows in the base course, and it bioremediates up to 99% of polyaromatic hydrocarbons. So this bacteria eats the motor oil that drips on it as you drive across it, and it turns it into carbon dioxide and water before it has a chance to pollute surrounding water bodies. Heavy metals diffuse into the cement paste itself, trap sediment, and for every 11 square meters of car park we're creating 1 cubic meter of stormwater retention that's not getting into our streets and clogging up our stormwater drains. Oh, and that's the driest driveway in Christchurch, by the way. That's on Calvin Street, where everything was sort of flooding during our last monsoon. So I'm here to talk to you guys about a new product. It's called EnviroCurb. And it's a permeable concrete curb that is to be placed next to urban trees. And what happens is the stormwater that otherwise would be wasted down the drainage system is funneled via a tray underneath it into the adjacent urban tree. It's extremely strong, as you can tell from this 4-ton load parked on it. And you can couple it with drainage cells, tanks, or you can use it without the tray just next to your rain garden, depending on what you require. So the reason why precast is really important is because the organic debris, while it's still permeable, when you place this next to asphalt, the sticky asphalt fines that grind off underneath tire pressure get into the runoff, and it gets into the void structure and acts like chewing gum. So it's the only thing that'll actually destroy permeability over time. And we know it's going to happen. We just don't know how fast it's going to do it. So being that you can screw in these interchangeable plugs, you just pull it out and a new one. So what I'm here to ask you guys, very humbly, is if I can put a couple test sites in Banks Peninsula somewhere and just go measure it over time and see how fast it takes for it to degrade at no cost to council. I'll pay for all materials and all that stuff. Hopefully we can sort of map out what happens, and council, being a very risk averse organization, can know exactly what they're looking at. Thank you.
Okay, we've got some questions. Nigel?
Yeah, how big an area would you want to do these tests?
I think maybe pick 2 or 3 urban trees that you want to support, and then just put it in there, and we'll do some infiltration testing probably 6 monthly.
Okay, so would you work in with other community environmental groups, local environmental groups?
I haven't worked with anyone yet, but if
Okay.
you have any suggestions, I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
We've got Scott, then Tyrone. Scott, you've got a question?
Yeah, hi. Hey, great presentation. All for stopping dirty, grubby water getting into the stormwater. The problem with permeable concrete is its load-bearing capacity. It's not as strong as normal concrete. So are you suggesting this goes on the sides of roads, on high-speed traffic areas, or somewhere else?
Suggesting you put it as a curb installation. So people may be parking on it from time to time, but our permeable concrete mix has about a 22 MPa, which we find to be pretty comparable. If you need something stronger, we can actually design a stronger installation by using a larger aggregate and just pouring it thicker. So we've done like distribution centers where heavy trucks drive in it all day. You can do fire stations with really heavy trucks that drive on it sometimes. Just depends on where you're going to put it and what you're using it for.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Tyrone, question?
Hi, Adriana, nice to see you. You must have some places in mind that you think would be the ideal spots.
I think it would be fun to put it in Littleton, to be honest. They have quite a bit of runoff there, and they've got asphalted streets, so you'd be able to measure it over time.
Anywhere in particular?
Well, I think staff might have an idea of where they have some urban trees that need a little bit of help. Essentially, I would just need to know where you guys would most like it to be put, and then I can find out what type of curbing is there, and then create a mold to suit that so that it's like a seamless transition between it. So it's just several different kinds of curbing.
Howard?
Yeah, just have you discussed this with Pat?
Not yet. I had a couple conversations with arborists who were really interested in using it, and then the question was, how long is it going to last, and how do we plan for that? So this is sort of the first step to figure out how long it actually does last.
Okay, I would have thought Pat's would be the first step, just to clear. Not critical, just clearing.
Whoever you think that I need to be talking to, I will talk to.
I wouldn't know. Hey, don't expect me to know.
Right, so we will get this information through to staff and go from there. It's a starting point, so no, it's exciting.
Thanks for
Thank
your
you.
time.
Cheers.
Next up, we have Harry. Morning, Harry. Welcome to the table.
This document arrived from the Post last week. It's the Strengthening Communities Together Strategy document. Arrived a letter of thanks for making a submission. I think that's the first time that's ever happened, actually, that's turned up in the Post. And actually, on the subject of the firsts, 2 weeks ago when it rained, somebody from the council rang up and asked if everything was okay in Hickory Bay. And I've lived in Hickory Bay for 30 years, and that's the first time that's ever happened. So maybe things can be made to change. So on the one hand, we've got this document. It's quite well written. It says all the right things. I said that in my submission. It's all about the council and the community actually working together and achieving things. It's got, political jargon in here and slogans, but you get that, don't you? It talks about owning the future in partnerships. On the other hand, we need to take a critical look at what actually happens. At the same time that this document was being prepared, there was a survey being conducted of council satisfaction and so forth. And I think you know what the result was. In the last 12 months, the general satisfaction result has gone down from 49% to 42%. On that trajectory, you'll be on zero by the end of the decade. And that's just mathematics, isn't it? And then the pre-election survey, pre-election summary document that got produced paints the most dismal picture. I'm not surprised it's difficult to get candidates for a lot of council jobs. Looking locally, what do we see? Repeated instances where the council and the community are not really quite on the same wavelength. You know, things come to a conclusion, but the community is often not on board with that. There's been big issues. There's been the way the cruise ships were handled in previous years. There's been smaller issues. For example, tactile pavers on the footpath. That's a pretty small issue, you might say, but you know, it's an unwelcome sort of attempt to try and standardise and improve the town. You know, that's improved from the point of view of people who don't actually have an ownership stake in the place. In my submission on this document, I said it was well intended, but it was all pointless unless it was put into practice. If we're really going to own our future, then we need some fundamental changes in the relationship with the council and with other authorities too, for that matter. As you know, I've organised a meeting in the Gaiety on the 28th, where the council staff and other agencies are going to come here and they're going to tell us what they are really up to. That meeting is part of the process. I'm hoping that there will be real communication, increased understanding and respect. The meeting is also part of an exercise to reinforce the point that there really is a difference. We are a different community to the city. Solutions that may work in the city may not necessarily work here. We have different attitudes and ideas and different standards. And when the council interacts with this community, they need to recognise that from the outset. I think this community board could do more. I know you produce newsletters and so forth, and a lot of good work goes on behind the scenes, but the thing is, it is behind the scenes and it doesn't get out there in the public and it's not readily visible. I don't see a routine level of two-way communication with the community. But the main impediment to implementing this document, this one here, is the culture within the council, the attitudes we experience. The point is, if the community here says, you know, with a reasonably coherent voice, that there's a problem, or if we say there's a project that should happen, that is the starting point and the foundation stone of the entire discussion. What we find, the council come back and say, here's a list of reasons why this can't happen. That comes across as obstructionism. You know, the results, frustration, no progress. And if the council say, no, you don't have a problem, that doesn't make the problem go away. It just means the community has a bigger problem. The result is resentment and annoyance, and those emotions poison the whole relationship. And that's a factor that's driving down, you know, that plunging graph line of the approval rating has been driven by that sort of thing. And as an example, the way the cruise ship business was handled and this current business about transport and buses. We say there's a problem, council say no problem. So we've got a double problem. And this document here, this strengthening community strategy, you might as well just chuck it in the bin unless there's going to be better attitudes. So what can council do about this? I'm going to make a submission to the CEO and emphasise these issues and point out there needs to be a widespread cultural change in the organisation. It could be that already staff get taken away to a room with no windows on Friday afternoons and get re-educated on this document. I don't know if that's happening or not. If it's not happening, I think perhaps it should be happening. And I'm betting some staff would not get a pass mark out of that process. And if they can't take on board the principles in these documents, they don't deserve to be employed. And I'm hoping the community board here will take a similar stance and will support our efforts to make this document meaningful. Thank you.
Thank you, Harry.
Thank you, Harry. See you on the
Thank you,
28th.
Harry. No, that was, we appreciate coming along, and there is a lot of issues going on that we need to keep on top of.
And I hope you'll come along on the 28th.
Thank you, Harry. Right. Next, Victoria, welcome to the table.
Thank you for allowing us to address you today. And we also want to thank you for your 3 years of service. Some of you won't be coming back, and we appreciate you all. So thank you. And I assume you've had an opportunity to review the PowerPoint presentation. And I regret it was late, but we didn't get final approval for speaking rights till late on Friday. Actually, at this stage, I'll turn it over to Mike, because you hear enough from me. I may make a few comments later.
Well, thank you, Victoria, and thank you, community board members. Actually, Harry, well done.
Yes.
You said basically everything I was going to say, so I'll just repeat it because sometimes that helps the matter sink in. It feels like deja vu because I looked at our notes here, and on July the 25th, the deputation was made to the community board on exactly the topic of the traffic plan or the absence of one. So perhaps that just amplifies what Harry's saying, that we do a lot of work behind the scenes, just as you guys do. You guys get paid for it, we don't. And advocacy groups like us get the feeling that we're just not being listened to. You politely listen here, a report will go to council, and then it'll come back and we'll be told there is no problem, so this is what's going to happen. It was over a year since the last cruise ship was here with the buses associated with it. And we've been saying as a community, this is a great opportunity to think up a new way of doing things. Because as a town, it doesn't look great when we're absolutely crammed with buses, parked, sitting by the school, sitting on Beach Road, or even trying to pass each other on the main street. Something better needs to be done. And it's not our job to come up with solutions, but we have as a means of trying to move forward. And our solution has been rejected. And the council has a traffic engineer who seems to believe there is no problem. And so I think the solution to this, we all believe there is a problem, and we live here, he doesn't. So when we've pointed out issues, he's challenged photographic evidence, said, well, I wasn't there when that photo was taken, so I don't believe that it's accurate. So he's accusing us of photoshopping. Look, this is ridiculous. And you know, this guy and his department are paid staff of the city council, elected representatives like you, Andrew. We would like you to bring members to account and make them do the wishes of the community. And until we have a face-to-face with such members, we won't feel satisfaction. So, Harry, I applaud you having a meeting organised for later in the month, and I really endorse the idea behind it. But this would be a great opportunity for staff members who make decisions which impact on us, for them to be invited and in fact instructed to attend, so we can speak to them face to face and not do it secondhand through a community board resolution, which then gets dissipated amongst the filing cabinets of Hereford Street. We have two issues. One is road safety, which is pretty obvious, and the other is visual appearance. Personally, I'm fed up with seeing these tacky little tripods with sandbags on the legs straddling the pavement, announcing a major event is in place. We've suggested for years a simple solution of retractable posts could be improvised and put into effect so that when visitors arrive here, they actually think we're serious about being a tourist town, not some tacky little place with roadwork signs everywhere. So I welcome the opportunity of engaging under the spirit of this new document with council staff and hope that we'll have the opportunity to do so. Thank you.
If I could add a few words to what Mike has said, this new strengthening community strategy that came out last month encourages public participation in order for communities to own their future. And it includes terms like public safety, active citizenship, preparedness, and relationships. It's all highlighted in this document. And I think there has to be a clear understanding of the goals and outcomes and priorities through a collaboration and partnership, which is exactly what the Civic Trust has been trying to do for years on the topic of cruise ships, which is on the front page of the press today. And I think our fatal mistake is that we have been too nice. We keep writing submissions in a dutiful manner and consulting as best we can. We need to lodge complaints because according to this report by the traffic engineer, you listen to complaints. The council responds to complaints, not submissions. So in my view, you should take this as a complaint. Maybe somebody will start listening to the citizens and ratepayers of Akaroa. We experience something entirely different from those in the ivory towers of Christchurch City Council. And in addition, whoever controls the narrative actually controls the situation. And this document, in my personal view, is nothing but narrative. It uses nice, kind, friendly words to seduce the citizens into believing that the council's on their side. Well, I really have to question that at times, but this is my personal viewpoint. I don't want to impinge on the quality or good name of the Civic Trust. And those goalposts are constantly being moved through interpretations of the standing orders. I took this to be a report, but then I realized yesterday it's only a memo. So you probably are not going to be allowed to even discuss it today in our presence. It'll be a private briefing out of public view and nobody will know the outcome. You are allowed to request reports, which you do based on our coming forward. And that's all you're allowed to do. The reports are written up in Christchurch behind closed scenes, and we get the feedback that there's no problem. Well, I'm sorry, there are problems. And I support Harry Stronach and what Mike has said. And probably I could go on, but I'll reserve further comment. Thank you.
We have actually come to the end of our time for the public forum this morning. So thank you both for coming along, and we appreciate all your input into everything that is happening. We are aware there is a situation coming up and we are watching it very closely. As you have seen in those documents, in September, we're hoping to see what that looks like. We haven't actually got the traffic plan at this stage. Like we're hoping to have input and see it ourselves.
We would like for the community board and council to be proactive. Don't go back to the way it was in 2019. Actually be prepared for the future. You know, the impact will be minimal year one. It'll come to a head in about 2.5, 3 years time, and you don't want to be caught on the back foot. We don't want to go through this again as citizens and residents of Akaroa.
Anybody wants to go through what we went through.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And to us.
Right, move on to the next part of our morning. We have deputations by appointment. I have got several here. So first up, I've got Hayley Rhodes.
Karatiana.
Oh, are you just both doing it together?
No, I made the booking, but it was for Karatiana. Well, I was going to put it in trust.
Oh, sure. Okay, thank you.
Ai, tēnā koutou katoa. Marongo hoki ngā kōrero te wā, nei rā te mihi kia koutou. Marongo hoki ngā reo karanga, ki runga te whenua nei, nā Pākihi whakatekateka o Waita, tai no rā ki te Pātiki, o te pātako o rā kai hautu, tū manu o tū tangata, tēnā tātou. Kia ora, my name is Karaitana Tekau, I'm the Kaiwhakahaere Matu, the CEO of Purapura Whetū Trust. We're making application and having conversation with the Christchurch City Council currently as a preferred option for the Kukupa Lodge, which is in Pigeon Bay. And I thought I would take a couple of minutes to talk about the organisation, some of our ideas, and then allow some time for some questions if that's appropriate. So the organisation is 20 years old. Started in 2002. Over that 20-year period, we've expanded our services into health, social services, and other public goods and opportunities. We're currently operating with around about an annual turnover of about 6 million. We have property asset in Christchurch over multiple sites. We operate out of 4 different regions: Central City, in the Linwood, and also on the, I would say, the city frame edge currently. And we're also in a relationship with two other NGOs who are operating a service for the Ministry of Justice out of Motukarara currently, and that's more recent opportunity. And in this instance, we are looking to develop a community site with the Kukupa Lodge, which has sat dormant for some time. We recognise that public goods are commodities and services that are funded through public taxation is an opportunity for everyone to participate. So we're practicing a rule of no exclusion, so anyone and everyone can participate if we're successful in the tenure, as long as they abided by certain rules, like if it was a smoke-free environment, then there'd be no smoking and so on. We're looking at, for the council to support the refurbishment of the existing buildings, and what we're offering to do through philanthropic and through our and other means is support the development of the site to include some type of tiny home eco-pod type model to increase the capability of the site and the number of people who can participate at any one time. We've recently been successful in one of those philanthropic adventures with the Rata Foundation, and have found that they were very supportive of our model, and I wouldn't see why they wouldn't come on board again in subsequent, say, 24, 25, to support another model happening on the Banks Peninsula. I know that you have a 50-page proposal, so I won't delve into the detail of that, but I think for us, those are some of the big ticket items that we can see operationalising in Pigeon Bay. And we just look forward to the further, for any further opportunity to enhance the site. I think one of our investment strategies is that while it doesn't look like it would be a huge earner, from a business perspective, what we do see is that anything beyond covering the Christchurch City lease option would be reinvested into the site and the development of the site. So that's a commitment from the organisation as a philanthropic end. When we pitched the costs, we noticed that there was about 346,000 that the council were looking to invest, and so we came up with a funding model. We thought we could get somewhere between 50 and 60 annually from the site at full use, and we count that at around about a 9-month use, because we recognise there's some downtime in some of these sites where they're not highly utilised, i.e. in the middle of winter. And then that would, we could extend that opportunity over, if we looked at it over 20, 30 years, we would see I think the full fruit of that investment in terms of the council engagement, that initial funding would be fully covered over that period after annual costs. In order to kind of show some commitment up front, we were looking, I suppose you could call it a bond, but we were looking at laying, prior to each annual rent year, we would place a $10,000 bond over the property in order to ensure a sense of goodwill. So yeah, Q&A.
Does anyone have any questions from the table? Or
Yeah, I got one.
no?
Do you register charities?
Yes.
Yes.
Nigel.
You make some reference here about trap library and pest. Have you been working with pest-free Banks Peninsula or any other environmental?
We don't currently, but that's part of the intention. So we would see that as part of the ecological model, working closely with Parks and Recreation, taking advice. And
yeah, I could.
Any questions from the team on Zoom? Scott, you've got a question?
Yeah, kia ora. Just wondering, what's the maximum lease term that Christchurch City Council will allow?
Is this
If-
is this a question for the speaker or is it a question for staff later?
For the speaker, obviously they've been through the RFP process and in discussions. Is it a 10 over 10 over 10 30-year lease?
Not currently. We were looking at, I believe it was 3 on 3 on 3.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Okay, Andrew.
Thank you very much indeed for coming along to speak with us this morning. So you're obviously looking at using the site, seasonally, 9 months of the year was the suggestion. What's the sort of intensity of use that's proposed? How many people on site? How many days of the week, or what days of the week typically? Would this be weekend or weekday activity? What sort of intensity of use would there be? And I mean, I guess I'm thinking, we've got a building that hasn't been used for many, many years. What would neighbours expect to see or hear that's different than they've been used to, I guess, is the spirit of my question.
I think that on average, we would see be 3 to 5 days of each 7-day week. And that'd be at its height. If it was at full capacity as we perceive it, that would be around about 12 people in overnight opportunities. If it was being used in a day activity, to give some examples, example of a primary school coming out to use the site, that may be a class load of children. So that may be up to, say, 30 young people for a period of time. It would be about 4 hours of a day.
And transport to get people there and back, are you anticipating that it would be, in the case of a primary school, they'd come in by bus or minibus?
May come in by bus or minibus or
movements?
Yes, so I would say, I think generally groups coming in by van or car, so it'd be very, I would make the comment that it'd be quite low, a low volume comparative.
Great, thank you.
Nigel, you have got a question.
Just about traffic management and destination management, very heavily on our mind. How have you got a plan around the parking and off-site, off-road parking and what that with this project?
Yeah, one of the suggestions that we've discussed with council is to redefine some of the land as a parking bay. Currently, it has a long driveway that leads straight up to the lodge, and we think to the right-hand side, we could create a parking bay that would accommodate 3 to 4 vehicles.
Thank you. Me?
Okay. So thank you very much for your time this morning. We'll carry on with the other people that are here, the deputations, and then we'll go straight into the report. So if you want to hang around for half an hour, we will take the report next after we've had the deputations. So thank you for coming along.
Hey, tēnā koutou.
Next I have Peter. Morning, Peter.
Sorry, never done this before. Kia ora, my name is Peter Staples, and I wanted to thank you for giving me this time to speak. I am here today to strongly object to the proposal of the Kukapa Schoolhouse on Pettigrews Road to be used as a community wellbeing hub. I've many concerns regarding Putapura Whetū Trust's planned usage of the building. As I've only 10 minutes, I'll refer to them as PWT from now on, if that's not offensive. My family purchased the property next to the field beside the schoolhouse in the 1970s, and the deciding factor was the field next door and our belief that it was a public reserve and would never have people staying on it or building on it. I now live there myself, and the main reason I moved here was due to its isolation and peacefulness. I have a broken back and mental health issues associated with the pain that I am in 24/7. The opportunity to live here full-time, knowing it was a quiet, peaceful place, was the reason I moved here and has helped me get through the last few years. I'm very concerned at the disruption and noise that will come from the proposed hub. The first I became aware of something happening was when I came home one day about 6 weeks ago to find boundary pegs surrounding the property. I talked to a few neighbours and discovered that a group was looking to use the Kukapa school. I was also surprised when I heard that it was a local batch owner whose batch was less than 500 metres from the school and it is the CEO of this group's proposal. I was very disappointed to find that even though they were a community health and services group, Mr. Tickle did not feel the local community were important enough to discuss this with before applying to use the school. I thought this was very rude and immediately made me suspicious of their intentions. I would, though, like to make it clear that this is not an attack on PWT. They are obviously doing great things in the wider community. It's just this proposal in this location that errs towards the absurd. I emailed the Council on Heritage New Zealand to see if I could get some actual facts. Both were very helpful and gave me some more understanding of the building and what it was being proposed for. That said, it was still very unclear as to what PWT wanted to use the building for. I was told on Wednesday that the Council had approved 346K for the repair of the building. This amount seems several hundreds of thousands of dollars short due to the building's derelict condition. I also received PWT's proposal and would like to go through a couple of points they make. They state that it will be used to learn the history of the school, Pigeon Bay and Banks Peninsula. There already are existing places on the peninsula to do this. They say there would be eco sleeping pods on the field next door, art classes, pottery, and the need to build a kiln. PWT do not have funding for this at this stage. So what happens if they cannot get the funding? It would also be a campsite for Girl Guides, Scouts and school groups. And they say the field is ideal for putting up tents. I dispute this as the field is a slope. It would be a location for 30ths, 40ths, etc., but not 21sts, implying that older people won't misbehave or make excessive noise. This is a ludicrous suggestion and is willfully ignorant or just very naive. Just because someone has signed a form stating they will obey the rules does not equate to them actually doing so. I would be surprised if noise control would drive the 90+ minutes to issue a compliance warning and then return later if the sound is turned back up, which means residents will have to deal with possibly drunk and unruly people. They also state there will be weekend-long activities. Sound and voices travel a long way in this valley, especially at night. As an ex-events organiser myself, I have real-life experience of how noisy people can be, especially when children and alcohol are in the mix. This whole proposal sounds more like an event centre rather than a community wellbeing hub. PWT claim that it is only 60 minutes from the city centre. This is wildly inaccurate. It's closer to 90 minutes, and once the new speed limits come in, it will be even longer. There's also a climate emergency happening right now, and council have said that they want to halve emissions by 2030. This location flies in the face of that. They say they want to use Pigeon Bay itself for activities. They suggest a pathway could be built for bikes alongside the road to the bay, which is about 5K away. This road, Pigeon Bay Road, is very narrow, has many blind crests, and simply does not have the space for a pathway. And without the pathway, the road is far too dangerous to have groups of people cycling or walking on it down to the bay. Even if there was enough room for the pathway, again, who would pay for this? And I note Mr. Tickle just mentioned the use of the field for the car park. I had put here, nowhere that I can find is there any mention of car parking. Pettigrew's Road is virtually single lane and far too dangerous to park on, and Pigeon Bay Road is pretty much the same. So what is their plan for parking of 30+ people, which Mr. Tickle has addressed? On page, PWT have also been asked if the project provides for the general welfare of society. The answer given is that it benefits individual and whānau well-being and health for the wider community. They claim the local community could also benefit from this hub. As they have not spoken to the local community, I cannot understand how they have come to this conclusion. I cannot accept that this proposal will have any positive effects for the local community. We already use the space, the field, as it was intended for. They then had the cheek to say that they will work with local neighbours to regularly monitor the premises. However, they have already lost the goodwill of many people on Pettigrew's Road due to them not bothering to contact us. The property has the legal right to take water from a bore on Pigeon Bay Road, but PWT have not been able to guarantee that the pipework is still connected or even there, let alone if the pipes are still suitable. They acknowledge that the pipes will need to be traced back to its source. Again, are ratepayers expected to pay for this? Every Pettigrews Road resident that I've spoken to so far are frustrated that they were unaware of the situation, and once told fully with details from the proposal, were all strongly opposed. And as a lot of the locals choose to live here, to live a secluded private life, I'm sure that many will have no idea about this and the impact of what is being proposed. We will lose our feeling of security with this event centre due to the amount of strangers that will be wandering about. Currently, I can leave my keys in my car, my house door's unlocked, doors wide open, and have no concerns whatsoever. This sense of security will be destroyed by this proposal. I've been coming to Pigeon Bay for 38 years, and in that time have seen the field used by many of the local families as places to gather and a safe place for the children to play, and it still is. I don't believe this will be the case any longer if this proposal goes ahead. In closing, I'd like to thank you again for taking the time to listen to me, but I also would like to point out that I've only had this proposal for 5 days, and due to the short amount of time I've had to look at it and absorb it, I am concerned that I have missed other inaccuracies and unrealistic assumptions and proposals that PWT have hidden in their 85-page presentation. I would very strongly urge the community board not to rubber stamp this proposal due to the unsuitability of its location and the outrageous costs that will be dumped on ratepayers and the negative effect it will have on the local community. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you, Peter. We appreciate your time this morning, and that was a very thorough presentation. So thank you. And as I said previously, you are welcome to stay around. We will speak to this report very shortly.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up, I have Sarah.
Morning. Kia ora. My name's Sarah Smith, and I'm here to talk about, I'll take my mask off, the Kukupa School building proposal at 380 Pettigrews Road. I live on Pettigrews Road, close to Kukupa School, and I've lived here full time for 5 years. And I moved here because it was a quiet rural area, and this new development proposed new development is close to my home. I received a copy of the proposal just last Thursday night, and I have some concerns about it, the scale of it. I'm concerned about the proposed visual changes of the site with the additions of portaloos, possible new toilets, sleeping pods, and a campsite. And I think this could be unsightly and detrimental to the area. Also, the events proposed, which goes into weddings, markets, and things like that. I'm concerned about an increase in traffic and parking problems, which have already been mentioned. The property is zoned as open space, but this proposal includes 6 pods and a campsite, when I thought the guidelines were for open space no more than 2 residential units. And these pods at 6 by 2.4 metres squared cover 86 metres squared of land, which is actually bigger and more land coverage than the existing Kukupa School building. When the council initially asked for expressions of interest for the school building, they said 0 accommodation overnight. And I thought that that was a fixed stipulation. There was going to be no accommodation offered at that site. But this proposal has introduced overnight accommodation, and in the proposal it says for 30, possibly more people overnight, and more if they can upgrade the toilets. This is a big increase of people staying in this rural zone in Pigeon Bay, and it's quite a large change of use, as there's been no accommodation at the Kukupa School site since the 1980s, when the youth hostel closed down completely in 1995, and even then it was only for 12 beds, not 30 plus in a campsite. Also, I am concerned about the lack of consultation about this with our community, the people who actually live on Pettigrews Road, who are going to be impacted. It's not in the middle of nowhere, this site. And I think that the needs of the people who live on Pettigrews Road need to be considered, the people in the neighbouring properties. The heritage building, it says, is only to be used 2 days a year when the trust allow access, which isn't very much. And it's also suggested the locals can have joint use of the reserve while it's being used by Purupura Whetū. But I think this is going to cause health and safety and security issues for local kids to go and use the reserve, play on the field, if it's being used for these purposes. And also the history and resources that they develop are not for everybody's use, community use. They're for their clients who are staying with them. I think Pete already mentioned the duplication of services, but we have art workshops, pottery workshops, history providers here, we have markets here, and we have a specialist environmental learning centre already at Le Bons Bay School, which could be used alternatively rather than setting up something new from scratch. And we already have low cost accommodation with the Pigeon Bay and the devotional campsites. We have Camp Taylor in Takamatua, which is for schools, and the YMCA camp in Wainui already. And finally, heritage. This building was used as a school up until 1949, which is within living memory, and the building is visited by people who went to the school there and value it. I think the school should be restored. It does not need to be brought up to code for occupancy. It doesn't need a new toilet block being built or a commercial kitchen being built in it. And surely it would be cheaper overall from CCC to repair the building without a partnership and all this new development, with no events and no overnight accommodation, as there are other suitable locations already in existence. So in conclusion, I'd like to see Kukapa School, the building restored with no accommodation, no commercial kitchen, and maybe a small scale visitor centre, which would be available to everyone, including the locals and other tourists. I feel that there's far too many people might be staying overnight here, and we don't really need a second campsite in Pigeon Bay when we already have one in the foreshore. So I don't think that this proposal is the right one for this school site. And this heritage of the school has been lost in the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Take time. Morning.
Morning. Thank you, Peter and Sarah. Kia ora. I am here to talk to you about my grave concerns regarding the submission from PWT for Kukapa School. Out of respect for the heritage of the building, I feel it is disrespectful to call it Kukapa Hostel, as noted in the submission, as that is not why it's such a venerated building and site. It is also not what any of the Kukapa community call it. Its life from 1878 to 1949 is why we are here, not its wonderful time since then as an intermittent youth hostel and reserve. This building is a part of the lore of the land, and its fingerprints are all over the peninsula in the form of its ex-students and their descendants. It needs to be appreciated for what it was and still is. From here forward, I will refer to the Christchurch City Council as the Council. Purupura Whetū Trust, which I will refer to as the Trust from here forward, do some good work. I've been in touch with some of their employees and those affected by the work and do not wish to disparage their mana or organization. They do a good service for our city, but I feel the greater good is not being served by bringing this project to Kukapa. Financially, this submission from the Trust does not address the true cost the taxpayer is being asked to pay. $346,000 has been set aside for this project. According to the submission, if that number is not enough for repairs and compliance and all extraneous costs, the council, and therefore the taxpayer is agreeing to pay for all the overruns. This $346,000, to be clear, does not include driveway, electrical work, car parking, land clearance, water, stormwater, and sewerage, all under the umbrella of consulting with the trust with how this will be undertaken. By accepting this submission, the council, and therefore taxpayers, are agreeing to pay these overruns. To not accept that this does not blow out the cost to the taxpayer well above the triple the cost of $346,000 is naive and not addressed by the submission. Realistic costing is imperative for a project of this size and impact on the community, both Kukapa and Banks Peninsula, as well as Greater Christchurch. By agreeing to the submission, financial competition to existing Banks Peninsula businesses will be strained further than the last few years have already stretched us. According to the Trust, 91.8% of their 2020 budget, most recently made available by the submission, was from the CDHB. So an entity, the Trust, largely funded by taxpayer dollars, CDHB, is proposing a project, Kukapa School, completely tax and ratepayer funded initially to compete with tax and ratepayer businesses on Banks Peninsula. We have many campgrounds on the peninsula, 3 marae, as well as ecopods in Wainui and Little River. Although no ecopods in Pigeon Bay, as the Trust states in their submission. For the record, Te Wepu, whose ecopods the Trust has said they are wanted to complement in nearby Pigeon Bay, are in Wainui, and they have asked that they be removed from this submission as they are not in Pigeon Bay and view their ecopods as quite different from the Trust's vision. I will do my best not to impinge on the Trust's mana from here forward, with all due respect. There are plenty of local artisans and crafters, as well as food foraging workshops and kaimoana being gathered. The taxpayers and voters must be told why they are funding services that are already here. The council has a document called Public Participation in Community and City Governance and Decision Making, Activity Management Plan, Long-Term Plan 2015 to 2025. There's a couple of issues that are raised that I do not believe are being addressed with what we're looking at here. Focusing on what we want to achieve, council undertakes activities in order to deliver on the community outcomes for Christchurch. The outcomes that relate most directly to the delivery of this activity are, I'm just going to read 2 of them. The council's goals and activities are clearly communicated to the community. Decisions are transparent and informed by timely, accurate, and robust information and advice. We will know we are achieving the above outcomes when we see the following results. The media and the community receive timely, accurate information about council issues and decisions. The Tickles are our neighbours, and dare I say friends, I thought, and they have actively evaded discussion. Mr. Tickle needed help a few weeks ago to move a newly acquired, crazily heavy pizza oven. So I, like a good neighbour, gladly helped with the lift. Weekends we don't ask about Department of Labour safety regulations, do we? Did you mention putting $600,000 of huts in the area adjoining my property? You know the answer. Mrs. Tickle has been asked many times in the last 6 weeks to address the community regarding our concerns, and I will not reproduce her replies without her consent, but she has been less than forthcoming. Despite my growing skepticism, we still welcomed to our house less than 7 days ago. Mana is important to me. Is a mission a lie?
Can we just keep it to the topic of the
Sure.
news rather than people?
Sure.
Thank you.
The council has sent no emails, no discussion, not even a good old piece of paper in the letterbox. To paraphrase, and at the risk of redundancy and repetition, the council's long-term plan's goal of informing the community about issues and decisions has not been seen through. This is deeply concerning, not just for us, but should be for the greater Christchurch region. Looking to the future, we want to preserve history and heritage, flora and fauna, and a true favorite of mine, Kukapa, a humble wood pigeon, keruru to many. Kukapa is another word for keruru. I've had a hell of a time exploring the etymology, but that is how Pigeon Bay got its name. Wood Pigeon Bay was too wordy, but due to the number of keruru around this area, the name was helpful for early settlers. One function of the site should be encouraging the nesting that goes on locally. Every year in the spring, we see the keruru in clouds, and with careful native planting, this should be encouraged. This is not an ideal forum, but as an idea, I would like to suggest that the minimum amount is spent on the schoolhouse purely repairs and compliance costs. To be clear, that will be at least $346,000. Then create an educational site surrounded by native bush and local wildlife. The bellbirds and piwakawaka are everywhere. Keru year-round, as well as lots of other native flora and fauna. The schoolhouse should be an honest snapshot of how it was, with readily available information about its times through the years. Signage and council support to steer interested folk here. Let us revere our heritage, not tarnish it with more buildings, more kitchens and parking lots. To that point, the Kookaburra community will get rid of the existing toilet bunker. I can name 20 people from the Kookaburra community who I have spoken to and do support this endeavour, in full communication with council and all relevant trades and consultants. Minimal outside help will be necessary. Keeping the place open and secure is easy. Mate. I would offer places such as St. Luke's and a Little Ekaloa as a comparative place with amazing history, which has minimal staffing. If you've not been, please go. If you have been, you will appreciate that I'm saying a well set up historical site needs bare bones staffing, but can be a world-class heritage value in our backyard. I've seen a blueprint of the original building from 1880. The footprint was approximately 62 square meters. There's talk of 80 square meters of huts. Future expansion and a completely ugly toilet block is already there. The Kookaburra community will get rid of the existing toilet bunker, an obvious eyesore which had its time, but I think no one would miss. Let us celebrate and invest in this spot for its distinctive history and place in the Banks Peninsula story.
Thank you, Duncan. We appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you. So that rounds off. I know I have had other emails come through from other people regarding this report, and I have forwarded them to the board. So in light of all this, can I ask that Russell joins us at the table for item 9? We'll move that forward now. If you've got a moment, Russell, do you mind? Just I don't know if there's people wanting to hear what the discussion is regarding this report. So we'll move to item 9. The Kookaburra Hostel FP results in future use. So Russell, I'll let you kick off and then we'll no doubt have questions of you shortly.
Right, okay. Thank you. There's interesting things being raised. So I'll just go through the process. So we have been trying to find a future use for the Kookaburra Hostel. And I noticed in the report, you will notice that I have mentioned the various names that it has been referred to. And for ease of clarification, we have just referred to it as Kookaburra Hostel. Since the earthquakes, there was a number of buildings that came out through the council that needed repairs. This one suffered some earthquake damage as well as degradation. And so after the 2012 earthquakes, the council made a resolution they wouldn't release any funding to repair buildings until there was a future use. So we actually started way back in 2014, I think it was, when we actually went out to the public for the list of buildings to try and determine a future use for them. We had no response. Nobody wanted to use the Kookaburra Hostel. Part of the proposal was that council would put money aside in the budget to repair the building to bring it up to a healthy home standard. And after that, the building would then be self-supporting in that the council wouldn't be required to prop up any activities that happened within it. If there was a community group that wanted to use the building and they could actually show there was community support for it, then that also would be acceptable. And as you know, we've got a few buildings around the peninsula and the city that have that outcome. With this particular building, we didn't receive any applications at all. So we tried again in 2017, I think it was. We went out for EOI. We didn't receive anything from there. We went out again in 2018, I think it was, 2018, 2019. And we received a couple of applications. We worked through those one application first of all, and it wasn't feasible, it wasn't economic to actually for their use to sustain using their building once we had done it up, unless council propped them up. And so that was really not the idea at all. We don't have the funds to prop up businesses using our buildings. So we went out again and we went for an RFP this time, and we had 2 applications come through. We worked with one application, but they pulled out. And the second one, with 3 applications. One pulled out. Then worked with the second one. We evaluated it, and their valuation against the economic use of the building was not as high as Purapawhetu Trust, or PWT as we'll call them for short. So they actually came out through. So we actually had a look at their application, and to us, they look like they've got potential to use the building once we've actually brought it up to a healthy home standard. They have indicated that they will put money into the development to bring it up to a further higher standard, which is fine by us, by staff. And then they will actually pay a lease back to us, a rental back to us for using the building, which again meets our council requirements for using the buildings. This report at the moment has come to the board to ask for 2 things. One is to look at approving this community-based Kukapa Maori Health Social Service Centre, and as a future use. That would mean the next stage from there is that we will actually talk to the group and start to go through their proposal to see how economically feasible it is, which we think it is, and also for them to delve in a bit more into how they're going to run it. So this isn't a lease. We're not asking for a lease at this stage. We're asking to be able to work with this group and to approve the future use of it, for this use, so that we can actually start looking at the repairs to the building. The costing that is in the budget at the moment was done from 2017, 2016, long time ago. And without a future use, we can't actually do a scope of works to work out what is the cost to actually redo it up, to redo it up to a healthy home standard. And so this is very much a preliminary stage whereby we need to actually look at what the costing is going to be. It may be a lot more than what is in our budget, and we will need to go back to council to ask for more money if that is the case. Alternatively, if PWT wanted to invest in it, they could put money forward to repair the building as well. That's be acceptable. But we don't know the actual cost until we do a scoping exercise, and we can't do that until the board has approved the future use. And this is going back to the council original resolution. Once we have done that, once we've got a good scope of works, we know the cost of it, we know how much money we've got, we've looked more closely at the use of this building. We'll then draft up a lease, and we can put in the lease any conditions about the use of the building. And that will include things about noise, vehicles on site, people on site. Basically, we need to ensure that the reserve that it sits on and the building itself, once repaired, is not destroyed or damaged by or overused by the potential use of it. And that's our obligation, to make sure we're using council resources. So we'll bring that back to the board with a draft lease. The board approves that, then we can go out for publication. We actually don't need to because it's a local purpose reserve, but in this case, we would go out for public notification on the lease document to see if there's any objections to that. And those can be discussed and worked through. But we're hoping that we can address any community issues through the actual lease conditions. Now, I should actually use a couple of other things came up in the discussions. So one that was status about the repair of the building. So with the toilet block and showers, for example, they need to be brought up to a healthy home standard, which they certainly are not at the moment. Because this building is a local purpose community buildings reserve, we need to, and the community is going to use the building, we need to make sure the building is up to standards for full or disability use, basically, which means that there need to be ramps put in, there need to be accessible toilets and a shower as well. So those basically are non-negotiable. That's our requirement to do that, to ensure our buildings are brought up to standard. Once we've, as I mentioned, brought the building up to standard, then we would lease, well, we've hopefully got a good lease in place. And the idea is that the building won't cost council any other money apart from doing the long-term maintenance on it. The group that goes in there they would actually have to maintain the day-to-day use of the building and the grounds, and we expect a rental from them as well. Because this is a commercial use we're looking at, and I should mention that PWT is a not-for-profit community-based group. So they are actually meeting the needs of the building's use and of the use of the land and the site. Now, with regards to the area of the land, the area we're talking about is just where the mature pine trees are back to the building itself. We're not talking about the paddock behind the pine trees. That is a recreation reserve. That's not a local purpose community-based reserve, which means that you actually can only be used for recreation purposes. It's not to use for accommodation. You can, whether you can have overnight camping on it, that's another matter, but it's certainly not to use as it's not part of the lease area, and it is available to the public at all times. So PWT can use it. It's a recreation reserve. The neighbours can use it. Anybody can use it. We also, we can, as a recreation use, we can put parking in that reserve for the use of the reserve and the adjoining reserves. And if we have the finances, then it would be sensible to put parking in there for 3 to 4 car parks. That is permitted under the Reserves Act and also under the district plan. And it's our standard thing for the use of the reserve. So that again is not an overuse, and it's good. With regards to the use of the reserve, we've got a few trees to cut down. There's a lot of, the trees there at the moment are reasonably safe. We get them checked out by an arborist. But there's a whole lot of secondary scrubby growth, pittosporums and things to the north that need to be cut down to allow light into the building, because the building is very shaded, which is bad for the building. Inside the building actually is in very good condition. The floor is slumped, but otherwise the panels inside are really good. And PWT is, as part of the heritage aspect of the building, they will have to actually ensure that any developments or use of the building will meet the heritage requirements. So they can't go taking out any walls. There is one wall in there which is not a permanent wall, which we have agreed we will take out as part of bringing the building up to a healthy home standard, which makes it into one big room again. And that's the way it was before in the school there. And also we'll put back a fireplace as well, a wood burner basically, as heating. The kitchen, we can bring the kitchen up to standard, but PWT has said they would like to put a commercial kitchen in there, which again would fit the use of the building because it's a very lean-to, it's a very small area. And we would work with them. That could be built onto the end of it. And from our heritage side, that is acceptable. Any changes to the building would have to go for resource consent because they're heritage building, heritage setting. So that will go through the process as well. So the heritage values will not be destroyed in the building by either us or any future tenants. The other thing we have to do to the building is that part of the floor had slumped in one corner. We'll need to look at that and repile it, put the boards back on the outside again, fix the guttering up, paint it, put a new roof on as well, and do the electrics and the plumbing. Now, those are our requirements as a good landlord, as an owner of the building, to do that, regardless of who goes into it. The other thing I should mention is that this building has been derelict for a long time. We haven't had any groups come to us, offer to fix it up. We haven't had any groups come to us to clear the ground. There's been no groups come to us to do anything to the building at all. So as a building, the thing I should mention is that we can't pull the building down. It is in our heritage strategy. It is council's policy to look after heritage buildings, and we don't want to do that. We want to work with the provider to ensure the building is available and is available to the community, which this PW said it can be, but also is looked after. This is a community building. Thank you.
Okay, before I go on to questions, I know everyone has got a few questions. The first one, I just want clarification on Russell. You obviously said when you go into lease documents, that goes out to public consultation, but why doesn't RFP go out to public consultation? You know, when you have got a good idea that comes to the table, why are we not seeking feedback from the community at that point before we then go 3 steps down the track? What's the rationale behind that?
Right. So basically, so we go for it's an RFP means that we have a specific use. So if we go for expression of interest is saying, in this case, we've got a building, we've got a reserve. We want anybody in New Zealand to come to us and say what you want to use this building for. Put a case to us. So it could be anything. They would have to meet the requirements of the District Plan and Reserves Act. They can apply for resource consent to look around to see if they can get around that, but that's what an expression of interest is. We did that, there was nothing. So an RFP is a request for proposals. And we went out and said, we believe that this building could be used for some hospitality, some community type uses, something that's got some commercial type base. We want you to come and tell us within that particular area. So we've narrowed it down a bit. In this case, it was commercial actually. So narrowed it down to a particular sort of area. And we've asked, again, it goes out and gets, which goes to the whole of New Zealand, come to us with an application, put forward your case, we'll give you a template of information we want, and we'll look at that. We'll evaluate that, and it's done by a team of different units that are in council. People look at that, and we will evaluate that, and we'll bring the proposals then to the community board to ask, is the community board interested in pursuing this preferred use that staff think is a good outcome of the RFP? If the community board says yes, then we will go to the next stage, which is delve a bit more into it, a bit more detail about it. So we wouldn't go for public consultation on an RFP because the board may say, we may go for public consultation on setting a restaurant up there, for argument's sake. The board may say, no, we think that's a terrible idea, but we've wasted all this time and money expense by going public consultation on an idea that the board didn't want. So we come to the board first and say, this is what staff have received. This is what we have evaluated and it meets our criteria. We think this is a good idea. What do you think? If you think it's a good idea, we would then do the rest of the negotiations, basically, and discussions. So it's still quite high in the air, still quite a high proposal. With a lot of questions we haven't been answered yet, but we don't want to put time into that, staff time, and we don't want the applicant to put time into that until we get some nod from the board. This is worth pursuing.
Okay, right. So I have got questions. So I'll go Andrew, and then we'll carry on around the room. Andrew, you've got a question for Russell.
Yeah, I've got a number of questions actually, and I'll try and get through them as quickly as I can. And I mean, the spirit of my questions is that we've been asked today as a board to approve the use of the hostel as a community-based Kapapa Māori Health Social Service Centre and Community Hub. Obviously responding to this particular proposal, I'm interested to work out whether we're actually in a position to give that approval today, or whether there's other information we need or other work that we need to have done before we can get to a point of considering whether we approve this or whether we don't. And it's in that spirit that I've got these questions. A local purpose reserve or local reserve community buildings, is the proposed use in the RFP and what we would be approving today consistent with that reserve status? And more specifically, is there any part of the proposal that would be inconsistent with that reserve status?
Yes, we've been to legal because we wanted to make sure that the proposed use did fit the Classifications Reserves Act, and legal have assured us that this proposal does fit in with the community use and does fit in with the purpose of the Reserves Act. At the moment, we're not aware of any part of the proposal that does not comply with the Reserves Act, but I should mention that we've just started negotiations, and the information you've seen in the report from the RFP proposal from PWT is about as much information as we know as the board does.
All right, thank you. So open space community parks, that's the zoning.
Yep.
I had some difficulty understanding the section in the report and the links through to the provisions in the district plan around zoning and use and so on. If a building and its surrounds are being used for events and functions from outside of that community, I guess that lead me to question whether that was consistent with the open space community parks zoning. Are you able to just expand on the section in the report on the district plan zoning And again, what is it about the proposal which is consistent with the district plan zoning? And is there anything that would likely need additional consenting or resource consenting? Or is there zoning that would be required to be changed to take account of this proposal? I know it's in the report, but I had some difficulty understanding it. And I'm suggesting that I may not be on my own in that difficulty in understanding.
So the open space community park zoning, so it does allow, remember that it does allow the area to be leased. That works in conjunction with the Reserves Act. So the proposed use fits in, as I mentioned, in aligns with the Reserves Act. If there was, this is where it comes around, really comes down to the conditions of the lease. For example, you mentioned events, and if it was events and festivals, we would either have to address that in the lease, or alternatively, they would have to apply for events, a one-day events license, basically, as can happen now in any of our parks. You can apply for events and run a festival, and that would then will look at the conditions that are required, and also if it triggers the resource consent as well. So basically, coming down to the use of the area from PWT. So from my understanding of it, from what you've seen in the application, in the RFP application, does comply with the zoning of it, because this is basically running workshops, education, training sessions. The accommodation is related to that, which is allowed. And it's not long-term accommodation, which would not be allowed. So I don't see too many problems.
And weddings and birthday parties and functions of that nature?
Again, it comes down to the lease. So in a lease, we wouldn't allow, well, this is a community-based thing. It's interesting. We need to actually, this is the step after we've been to the community board, is when we actually look at what exactly do the preferred lessees want to do. How does it fit into the legislation? So weddings will be considered an event, which would come into the normal parks events procedure, which as to whether it's permissible or not, and I can't tell you off the top of my head whether it would be for this particular area. It certainly wouldn't be covered in the lease. The other activities we would really need to look at the lease. Personally, at the moment, I think just top of my head is probably outside of the conditions we put in the lease.
All right. Now, the lease itself, obviously, there is detail that requires to be worked up and negotiated before you bring something back to us for approval. How long would you expect, or how long would you be proposing that lease was to run for?
So the lease can run up to 33 years under the Reserves Act. And actually, we've got Stuart on board. Stuart,
hello. The initial proposal in the RFP was, I think 3 plus 3 plus 3, but as Russell said, we could go up to 33 years. But as has been referred to, it is the lease negotiation that will come to, if you approve this use, the lease negotiation or the outcome of that will come back to the board for approval, and it would have been subject to consultation.
I guess where I'm coming from, and this is probably a discussion that's more appropriately had at that time, but I think it's important that we think about it today, is the investment that's going to be required in bringing the building up to the required standard for this use, and the rental income that would be coming in from the building, and thinking of the correct balance between the capital investment, the rental income, and the duration of the lease to actually stack up into a proposal that works. There's been a lot of comment from our submitters this morning, from the deputations this morning, around value for money for ratepayers, and there's a balancing act required there. And I think the length of lease, or the security of the length of lease, is one of the things that comes into play there, given how difficult it's been to find a use for this building. It's fair to say that if the lessee that we're signing this lease with was only to be there, for example, for 3 years, that may not represent good value for money for ratepayers in terms of the capital investment upfront we put into it. So I guess I'm signalling that when we come to have the lease discussion, if we get there, I'll be interested in picking up that value for money for ratepayers piece, or would suggest that the future community board should be doing that in terms of the length of lease, the level of rent, balanced with the community investment, for want of a better expression. That probably answers the question appropriately for today. Now, I've got just 2 more things, and I apologise for the number of questions. The community have expressed, or some members of the community have expressed, and noting that the people that we've heard from this morning have spoken to others in the community as well, a degree of surprise that, you know, clearly they only found out about this proposal very recently. I would suggest as the matter came onto the agenda for this meeting, so came into the public arena that way, or as people were engaging with workers on site. Was it intended that the community knew of this was when the paper went into the public arena? Or is there something as a matter of good practice we should have done before now to better socialise with the community what was happening prior, bearing in mind that most community members don't go looking at expressions for RFP that might be going out into the public arena?
That's a bit of a chicken and egg, really. We could have talked to the adjoining owners, but it would be along the lines of we may or we may not have a preferred use for it. You know, where do you start?
Well, I mean, obviously, as this paper was prepared, it was known that it was coming onto this public agenda as the agenda was published. Was it intended, as the paper was being prepared, that the community knew of this proposal was when the paper came onto the public agenda? Or should we, or would it naturally have been the case that we would have talked to the community before that? So in between knowing that this was the proposal and it landing in the public arena on this agenda, would we normally, or should we have discussed that with the community first, or has the correct process been followed?
Our process, we have followed the correct process, and the correct process is that any RFP applications received after closing date are evaluated by a panel of internal staff, which are representative of different areas throughout the council, which was done to mark up which is the preferred applicant. Our normal procedure after that is to come to the community board, not to do public consultation. For as I mentioned earlier, we don't know if the community board wanted to proceed or not with a proposal. All we really want is an indication from the community board they do support the proposal. Otherwise, we could be get ourselves in a situation whereby we might be consulting with the community on a proposal or 1 or 2 proposals, just to discover that the applicant wants to pull out, the community board doesn't want it, and we might have actually then raised the hopes of the community for a particular use of a building when in actual fact they won't proceed, which has happened in the past. And we have been then accused of raising the hopes of the community and not being able to proceed with it. So our process is for RFPs to be evaluated internally and come to the community board.
So the answer to my question is that it was not intended, nor would it be normal practice for this to have been socialised with the community prior to the report appearing on the public agenda of this board meeting.
Correct.
All right, final question. You suggest that the only way that you can do any further work on this is for us to approve the recommendations which are in front of us today. So that is to approve the future use of the Kukapa Hospital as a community-based Kapapa Māori Health Social Service Centre and Community Hub provided by PWT as the preferred lessee once restored. Now, we're expected to do that without knowing what the cost would be, without knowing what the details of the permitted use would be, without knowing the resource consenting requirements or the impact on the heritage fabric of the building. What would happen if the community board were to note the proposed future use, Or what would happen if the community board were to approve in principle the future use? Would that allow you to get on and do the work, or do you need us to approve this, despite there are lots of gaps in detail to be filled, as I would see it, before some of us may in fact feel able to formally approve the use in such a definitive way? If the board were to note the future use or to approve in principle, would that be adequate for you to then do the further scoping work that's required and maybe come back with another stage?
What we require to further this proposal is an indication from the board that they are willing for staff to negotiate further and find out more information from the preferred RFP applicants. So I think that one of the things is that this is not we're not asking for the board to approve the lease to this group. This is very much about we have a preferred applicant. We want an indication from the board to whether we proceed or not to work with them. That's the outcome we want. Because the lease, normally the lease would come to the draft lease would come to the board with the financials for the group, what the proposed use is going to be, what restrictions we have on it, would all be, that's with the time the board would then say yes or no, basically. So I think to answer your question, sorry Andrew, it's a bit of roundabout way. We need to do a scoping of the building really to find out how much it's going to cost us to bring it up. And we need to talk to the preferred group to find out what money they're prepared to put into it over and above what we have to make their proposed use successful for them, and also to address the concerns that the community have raised about noise and parking and access and those type of things as well. So
I guess what I'm saying, Russell, and thanks for the fulsome answer, is if the community board, because of those unknowns, the cost to bring the building up to the required standard, what the community group are prepared to, what the lessee are prepared to contribute, resource consenting requirements, heritage fabric protection, and the community concerns that, you know, some of us have heard formally just for the first time this morning, that may mean that the board doesn't feel able to approve, as you're asking today, but may be able to note the proposed use and ask for further work to be done, or that would allow further work to be done, or approve in principle, which is different than approving. You know, it's quite a big step for us to approve something when there's so much unknown. So if the board were to note the proposed use, would that allow you to get on and do that other work that you've described, with a view to then coming back for an approval once those questions, or, you know, asking for approval once those questions have been answered more fully? Because my view is that the board needs to know the answers to those questions before they can approve.
Yes, I think that would be fine.
So if we were to change the wording to note the proposed use, I mean, it puts an extra step in the process, but given the community concerns, my own view is that's appropriate. That's probably enough from me. I'm interested in what other board members might ask or think.
Thank you, Andrew. Anyone else have further questions of Russell? Howard?
I've just got one question. Why you did make a statement? Actually, I've got a number of questions, but I think Andrew covered a lot of them. You did make a statement that regardless of who goes in, certain repairs will have to be done. So why not do those repairs up front, approach the community and say, look, we've got this repaired building. What are the options, rather than saying, look, we've got this derelict building. Does someone want to use it? It's like me saying to a tenant, look, I've got a rundown house. Do you want to rent it? And I'll fix it if you say yes, you will.
A bit like the U cottage argument, chicken and egg thing.
Different discussion.
Basically, this comes back to, in the report in 5.2, comes back to the 2017 council resolution, which required a future use to be determined before the buildings could be repaired. I think there was concern that buildings were being repaired, but there was no body available to tenant them, unless council propped them up. Or so the council resolution. This was one of the last number of buildings. This was one of the buildings that was part of that resolution. So we can't release the funds to repair it until we know we've got a tenant that's going to go into it, or a DC.
Right, so, but we're not discussing a tenant here, we're discussing an applicant. So I'm a bit concerned about this preferred leasee statement, so I'd like to see that change, but. Just something else, what's to protect the paddocks at the back from de facto private use?
They're under Reserves Act, they're recreation reserves, which means they can only be used for certain things, base recreation base, as in any reserve in the city. There's no difference. So if someone went and we did have, of course, in Crammer Square, people go and camp in a reserve, there's certain things that we can try to do to get them off, basically.
So there wouldn't be any camping in that reserve area, there wouldn't be any restricted use, so people could walk through it at any time with their dog, no problem.
No, under the Reserves Act, the reserve it's not leased. It will never be leased because it's a recreation reserve. Well, I shouldn't say that. It won't be leased for this purpose anyway. This doesn't comply with the use classification of the reserve. So it's an open reserve that anybody is allowed to go into, basically.
So there'd be no camping or anything like that, and it was part of the lease.
No, I'm not quite sure about overnight camping, but it's something we certainly will not be. As part of this application, for example, if this application proceeds and they want to have camping nights in there, then that's outside the leased area. So and we have to look at the Reserves Act to see how we fit into that type of thing. But it's something that we would not, if we knew about, we would simply follow up.
Okay. Generally, I just think there needs to be more communication with the community, discussion with the community about where this is going. Rather than kind of chucking surprise. But I do see your point that going to the community with a proposal and then say, oh, sorry, we can't do it. No, thank you.
Thanks, George. Scott, you've got a question of Russell or Stuart?
Yeah, I do. First, I'd like to say I think it's great that you've actually had an RFP for this derelict building. I'd hate for it to sit there for another 20 years and just fall into disrepute. It is sort of the chicken and the egg, but I do feel as though Andrew hit the nail on the head with there is some more information, not only just for the board, but for the locals to make us feel comfortable to move on with this. In the RFP, it's mentioned several times about the gathering of kai. The preservation and the protection of the environment in regards to harvesting in the bay, is that going to be something that's discussed going forward? Or is this lease just going to be granted and that's sort of a side thing that's going to happen?
So the lease will be for the building in the reserve, that's local purpose community buildings reserve. And it will govern the activities that happen within the building in the reserve to ensure they comply with the Reserves Act and the district plan. What happens outside that reserve is another matter, basically. So that's something we wouldn't normally get involved with.
Okay, that answers that. Also, transport, you mentioned that there could be extra car parking installed on the reserve. Where would the funds come for that? And would that be part of the scope that's carried out by CC when they look at the building and everything to do with this RFP?
Yes. So the proposal at the moment is for some eco-pods to be used for accommodation to go onto the site. So what we would be asking is what parking is required, and then we would look at, can we fit it onto the actual site itself? One of the things that we've actually said is to repair this, to bring this building back up to the Healthy Home standard. We would basically bring it back up to a standard to cater for what the building was used before. So the building was used before, it had bunks in there, and it was there was, I forget how many people it could cater for, maybe 8 or 10 or something like that. And the toilets as well, there was three toilets in there and 3 showers. give or take a bit, something like that.
Yeah,
So
enough with
the idea is that we would bring that back up to standard again to make it a accessible toilet, accessible shower, but any additional toilets or showers over and above that would not be at our expense. That would be at PWT if they wanted to put more people into it. Same with accommodation. If they want to put more people in there than what were originally there, that is expense that is covered by them, not by us.
Okay. No, thanks for that, Russell. And lastly, has any consideration to the financial impact to the camping grounds that are in the area already been taken into consideration?
So again, this proposal is looking what would the site be used for and what does it need on the site to accommodate that use. So from what I understand is that PWT won't be running a public camping ground. They will be running, they'll have accommodation there for people to stay overnight or how long they want to stay, to be able to do the courses that are being run within the main building. So, so that I believe is how.
Okay, no, that does answer it. Sorry, I assume that it may also be opened to the public to use. Basically, it talks about rent quite a bit in here, but so that will be tied up with their activities they're running. So, yeah. I appreciate that, Russell. That's all from me. But I kind of agree with Andrew. I do support this, but there's a hell of a lot of information that needs to come back to the board. Thanks.
Thanks, Scott. I'll come back to you in a second, Andrew, because I know you've got some follow-up questions. Further questions from in the room. So I know there's a few people in here that haven't had a chance. Yep, Tyrone.
Sorry, if you've already said it explicitly, Russell, I'm not quite 100% sure, but so it would definitely go to public consultation at some point.
Yeah,
definitely would.
The lease document would, yes.
Yeah. So, like, if we were to approve this today, like, I mean, there would be a public consultation.
So the process today is to. I think it's a very good idea of Andrew's suggestion to change the recommendation to enable us to do further investigative work, and then we can bring a proposal back to the board. And if the board are happy with that, then we can go out for public consultation before the board agrees to a lease. We can put those extra in.
And if that all happened, just to follow up, so and if that happened, there would be an opportunity for the parties involved, whatever they were, to nut out some of the concerning elements of things.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
You know, everyone could hold hands and sing Kumbaya and get a good outcome, right?
Yes.
Eventually.
Yes.
Okay, Andrew had a follow-up question. Andrew.
Yeah, I do. I'm very conscious that we've talked about consultation and engagement and the knowledge of the local residential community or the local community in particular. I note in the report impact on Mana Whenua. The decision doesn't involve a significant decision in relation to an ancestral body or a body of water or other elements of intrinsic value. Is there engagement we could, should, or will have with Kokorarata in particular on this proposal? Because, you know, I'm guessing that in as much as this became knowledge to the public community when this report to the local community when this report appeared on the agenda, the same would be said for Kokorarata as Mana Whenua.
Yes, we can certainly, when we go out to public consultation, we will certainly talk to them, definitely.
That would just be part of the regular consultation, or would we engage in a different way?
I think that so the thing to come back to is that this is a lease of our building for basically a commercial use. That's funds that go back into the community. So we would follow our normal procedure that we would usually do, which is we would go to them as a community building that we want to actually lease out. Would they have any interest in it? What do they think about the proposed use?
But we would engage with them directly and deliberately, rather than just putting out the public consultation documents around the lease and wait to see whether they responded or not.
Sure, and I think council has has recognised that, that we are in partnership under the Treaty of Waitangi, and it is our obligations to actually treat them as a partner, which we would do in this particular case, as we have done in quite a few of our other lease properties, such as Red House as well. It's a good example.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so what I think we can all agree on is what Purupuru Whetū do is a pretty amazing work, mahi, that they do. It's great that we have something that's come out of the RFP process. At the moment, I'm uncomfortable with the wording in this, so I'd like to say Katie and Liz have worked out from what Andrew has said a different full wording, because I think approving the future use as we stand right now, I think is locking us in too tight to a predescript purpose, and I think we need a little bit more information. So what has Katie got out? So is it part C, the bottom bit, is that ask staff to pursue future use of Kupa Hostel as a community-based?
What I had suggested, am I on? No, you can hear me. What
Yes,
I suggested was note the proposed future use. And I guess we could add under request staff to do further work on this proposal before coming back to the board for the approval of that use.
I'd like to see that preferred leasee removed, because we're not actually discussing a lease here, we're just discussing opening discussions with the community. And
I think the really preferred leasee really needs to stay in there, because it's showing that there's a preferred leasee from the RFP process.
Yeah.
If we can get some wording that I'm comfortable with, I'll be happy to move.
No, it doesn't tie us into it, but it's just on the idea that is proposed. And I think for me, I would feel more comfortable if this goes almost to the next phase before any concrete decisions are made.
Can we
have any idea what we're making?
Sorry, Andrew, yes?
I'll be happy to move this when we get some wording that reflects what I want to move. That's probably the best way forward, unless, as the chair, you want to propose something different. So note the proposed future use of the Kukapa Hostel. So get rid of and request staff to pursue. So note the proposed future use.
Yeah.
No, provided by, as further saying, and request staff to do further work to progress this proposal, and request staff to do further work on this proposal before coming back to the board for request.
And request staff. After the word.
Yeah, that's all right. And request staff to do further work on this proposal before coming back to the board to request approval of that use.
So are you happy? So I'm going to read this out so we can all get an idea of it. So note the proposed future use of Kukapa Hostel as a community-based kaupapa Māori health social service centre and community hub provided by Purupuru Whetū Trust as a preferred leasee, and request staff to do further work on this proposal before coming back to the board for approval of that use.
What I'm saying is to request formal approval of that use. So what we're doing is saying there's another stage, there's more work to be done, the board aren't ready to approve it today, and depending what happens in the meantime, we may be willing to approve it in future, but come back and ask us when you're ready. And then, I mean, do we need to then change to note that a draft lease will then be brought, or do we just get rid of 2 for today and that'll come back when we bring the lease back for approval?
Yeah, no, I think
a procedural question as much as anything.
Item 2, so
remove 2.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm happy to be the mover then of that wording that I've put up as 1, and when the time's right, I'll speak to it.
Okay, so that's so Andrew has moved. We do need a seconder before we can go into discussion. So we've got a mover.
Well, will the council be engaging in the community with this future investigation or not?
That's what I'm just wondering. We're missing something.
Okay, can we just remove that for a second, Katie? I'm just having a look at the recommendation.
Could we put in a
There's no community
second
engagement here.
point that recommends that?
So maybe do
Could
further
affect
work on this
consultants'
proposal,
opinion.
including engaging with the local community.
It's a novel idea. Anything else said.
Yeah, nice. I
So
think
we
that
need
picks it up.
to end Verunanga?
That's a given.
That's a given?
We're part-
Okay.
we're
Part of the community.
Yes.
That's right.
Well, I'd like to say, do we need to, right, before coming back to the board to request.
We haven't got including neighbours either.
Okay.
Before coming, yeah, that's better.
So Andrew, are you
Yeah.
happy with that now that we have single?
I'm
no?
very comfortable with that. Yep, very happy.
Okay. So Andrew has moved, and Nigel has seconded. Okay, we can go into discussion if we need to.
Yes,
Andrew,
please.
do you want to speak to this? Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
Andrew,
I've had a number of conversations with people in the local community over the last few days. And there has been some surprise that this wasn't known or hadn't been socialized with that local community before appearing on this agenda, or before people, happened to be talking to people that were working on site or doing investigations on site. I was concerned that the board weren't ready this morning and wouldn't be in a position this morning to consider approving the future use because there was significant further information needed to be provided, more work needed to be done before we could get to a position of considering that. I think the resolution that we've got in front of us reflects the position that we're at currently, rather than the position that we might be in future once further work has been done, where we can consider that approval. Obviously realizing that the board that day will make its decision based on the information that's in front of it on that day. I mean, I appreciate the bind that staff are in, that in order to spend any money on this building, there needs to be a future use. But I think what we've got today is a practical way forward that allows staff to do the further work that needs to be done before the approval that was requested can be properly considered. And at the same time, I'd like to think give some confidence to the local community that there will be an opportunity for proper engagement prior to the board approving the use which is proposed. So I think we've found as happy a medium as we could expect to, given the processes that need to be followed here.
Thank you, Andrew. Nigel.
Yeah, I agree, Andrew. The disruption, I've had communications with residents as well over this, and the disruption is a big issue in a quiet rural area. And I hope that the communication and engagement with the community is open, honest, and just not some sort of a throwaway tick box.
Anything else before we move the motion?
Like, I know that we've all agreed of the value of Peninsula as a co-funded Māori health provider. Like, I think it's really important to stress just how effective the work that they do in our community is in very challenging circumstances.
Challenging circumstances.
Like this communication.
Very, very complex situation. So just look, I think it's really important to really make that clear, and I think that we all understand that. But I also acknowledge we've had 3 people from the community come to talk to us, and do have some concerns. So we actually have to make sure that these things get ironed out. Like, it's really, really important, and just supporting what Nigel said. So I think that there is a pathway there, and I appreciate that we get done on this, Russell. And yeah, I'd just like to see. I would like to see it ultimately. My gut feel was progress, but I'm happy with the way that this conversation's landed.
Anybody else? Otherwise, we've got to move it and seconder. Right. So we've got a mover and a seconder. All those in favour?
Aye.
Opposed? That's carried. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
And we look forward to seeing what this next sort of consultation looks like. So thank you. Right, I am actually going to call a 5-minute adjournment. So let us all refill glasses of water. Stretch our legs for a few minutes because I know we've got quite a bit more to do. Just take a few-minute break. So thank you.
Thank you.
So we'll just see if Andrew and Scott are still available, and then we'll get back into the meeting. Hopefully. Here we go. Thank you. Okay, so back on to item 6, presentation of petitions. I have none at this stage. Item 7, reserve management committee meeting minutes.
Madam Chair, I'm just going to agree with it and say that it would be great if we could, sorry, if we could make up a bit of time.
Yep, no, trying to, yes. I understand this morning was very full on and did take up a bit of time. So the 3 devotional reserve management committee meetings, we received the following. If there's nothing to add, I'll ask for a mover and seconder, please. Ruben's happy to move.
A second.
Tyron's happy to second. All those in favour?
Aye.
Right. Yep, okay, that's carried, thank you.
Enthusiastic.
Yeah. Okay, item 8, so correspondence from Tom. So I have a recommendation here to receive the correspondence from Tom Dobson in relation to establishing a raised observation point overlooking Te Waihora Lake Ellesmere. So we received the correspondence. Do we need to forward that to?
I wonder whether you should maybe forward it on to NZTA. To ask if they could upgrade one of the sites where you can pull up.
Yeah. So can we, so as part of this resolution, do we write a letter to NZTA regarding this?
Okay, just pass it on.
Pass it on, okay.
And also pass it on to the people who are doing the destination management plan.
Yeah, I'm happy.
So I mean, it would be.
The other thing is, I'd also like to have this just be given to our voting staff, because I know they work very closely with NZTA. Yeah.
So, I mean, given that it's adjacent to Te Waihora, it'll go through, like it'll come across the desk of the governance framework of Te Waihora, presumably, given that it, you know, that any proposal might have an impact on the health of the. So do we need to send a letter to anybody?
Well, it's flagging the idea, and where do we go from there is the next step. I think it's the who can we get to pick it up, because there is at Sunset Point there is a pull-off area. However, it is very full of potholes and not very nice to pick up, but a lot of people do almost every night and come home and see people pull off into that point to take a shot across the lake. So it's who we can forward this to and who can we advocate to, and then, like Sarah said, what other entities you bring into this project once, you know, it does look like it can go somewhere. But I'm not sure, because I know there is pockets around there that are council land that just need more gravel or whatever that looks like. So that's why I'm sort of asking the voting team to be tagged in on it as well, because some of those pull-off bays are actually for council.
No, council land is actually on the other side of the road.
Oh, it's true. Yeah, it is bluff side, yes. Still nice to keep them in the loop as well.
Well, I'm just wondering, is there a risk that we can go, yeah, yep, that's great, we can send it off to various agencies, and it passes through, you know, any consenting process, but has an impact on the lake that sort of doesn't get picked up, like, because the consenting processes aren't enough to prevent any impact. Like we've got a duty of care to the body of water as well. And I just want to doubly make sure that anything we do isn't going to somehow unintentionally impact the health of the lake.
Aren't we just sending a letter here? We're not agreeing with it, not disagreeing with it.
Just asking questions up front.
Yeah.
That's all. Like,
that could be a letter that we sent to the person who sent us the letter, though, right? We could suggest that they do that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we do that. I mean, that's got to be a primary.
Yeah, totally. But if they got that letter, then they could then also share that back to us or direct to NZTA.
Well, if you don't feel that you want to pass it on, you don't have to.
We'll pass it on. I mean, it seems like a reasonable idea. I just want to make sure that we, you know, that we don't unintentionally kick off some.
Well, include in that the board, you know, would want to ensure that there are no ill effects on the lake, and that the managers will be the lake.
Yeah, cool. Thanks. Yeah. That's helpful.
Motion to establish and arrange exemption point of looking into the law for this correspondence NCTA to council staff for recent decision management as well as voting staff. Anything else on that? Yes.
And then after that, we would just have voting staff, also including input and including the board's wish. Somewhat the board's wish that there would be no ill effects on the lake on such a proposal. And the guardians of the lake fully important.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so we've got a resolution here. It's slightly different to the just receiving correspondence, which we can be nice to add on. We are in agreement, so I'll ask for removal.
I'll move.
Tara's to remove.
I'll second.
Ruben's happy to second. All those in favour?
No.
That's carried, thank you. Okay, so we've done item 9, so we're on to 10. Philippa, I did see you on, there is a room full of beauties. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, and it's lovely to see everybody in that room there. Yes, around this table is Robin and Andrea and Rem, our new community development advisor in our team. So I'm just introducing you, board members. This session, we're considering applications received for this year's Strengthening Communities funding round, project starting from the 1st of September, and to allocate the funding. These applications have been assessed by staff, gone through peer collaboration and been workshopped. No new applications this year have been recommended for multi-year funding. The groups previously allocated multi-year funding are recorded at the top of the projected spreadsheet, and the agreed amounts will come from this year's funding. Regarding ANZAC, it was agreed before ANZAC Day this year that Akaroa Resource Collective will be the fund holder for the Akaroa and Little River commemorations. We have an application for these 2023 events in the schedule. Staff are recommending an amendment to last year's resolution for the multi-year to remove the dates for year 2 and 3 funding. That will be for this coming funding year and the next. The annual grant for Diamond Harbour is captured in the ANZAC board project this year with the wreaths. So all parts of that multi-year will be captured in other applications and decisions to be made today. This report is on the agenda to be decided at this meeting. Matrices attached to the report show only the new applications received this year, so the multi-years from previous years aren't included. Brief notes will be put on the spreadsheet to the right, in the right column, and your preferred amounts will be noted in the decision meeting column, where there are red, where the amounts are in red font. The budget this year is 198,572. This was approved for this year in the annual plan. The leftover will be transferred to your DRF, discretionary response fund, where it will be used for your board projects, applications from community groups, and applications that come to your youth development fund, YDF. Your discretionary response fund is open until it is expended or until the 30th of June 2023. You will note staff recommendations will leave a reserve of over $47,000. But this will increase as the carry forward from last year will be added, along with any returned grants or any other amounts that may become available throughout the year. You will note we have on the report, there is the first resolution is regarding the multi-year ANZAC and the change of dates. So I hand over to Tori now to pass the resolution or discussion and resolution regarding the ANZAC multi-year and changes to that, and recording any conflicts of interest, questions or comments, and changes to amounts. Yes.
Okay, so we just, I think the next step was to bring up that spreadsheet. Is that the plan? Sorry, Philippa?
Yes, please.
Yep, okay. So
oh, sorry, I thought it was up.
No, we haven't got it shared to our screen at this stage.
So that's people.
As we move into that part, I should declare a conflict of interest as regards Littleton Information Centre and Resource Centre, Littleton Information and Resource Centre Trust, as I'm a trustee of that organisation.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. We'll note that. Any other conflictions of interest?
Yeah.
Okay.
After you.
The French Fest.
Okay, French Fest for Nigel. Tara?
Recreation Centre Trust.
Okay, Littleton Recreation Centre Trust. And Ruben, did you have one as well?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay, no, I thought
I'll
I
let you know if
hand
that
off.
changes.
No,
Mask, adjusting my mask.
Okay, I
You
apologise.
just didn't want to be left out.
Okay, so we have got our spreadsheet in front of us. We go up to the top of that spreadsheet. Is it the top? There's the top there?
No, that's number 5.
So can we go up to number 1, please? People, just that's the way. Right. So we're just looking across.
And you'll note that those are all the multi-years 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 is the multi-year ANZAC that we are proposing an amendment to that resolution to strike out the dates, the second year and third year dates.
Okay.
With the red fonters.
Yes. No, okay, I can see that.
So, yep, scroll up, people.
Okay,
up
so
to number.
So we're going up to that one there. Oh, okay, so that's been taken out.
Oh, I see.
And we put back in as underneath. Yeah. Okay. No, thank you. So we need to. So, Andrew, you don't need us to change anything on that screen.
No, I'm happy, thank you.
Okay. So we've taken that from 1 to move it to Economic Resource Collective, which is 6 to 7.
So none of that money's dropped. It's all.
No, it's just moved.
Just
to
moved.
To the yeah. Okay. Now, did you want us to continue scrolling down?
Yes, please. Are there any? Yes. Are there any issues to do with the proposal from staff to have zero funding for that and to change the recommendation to remove the dates?
I think we are all happy with the new layout and how it is now landed. So, like I said, we're not losing any money. We're just moving it to more suitable. Right. Okay, that's the main thing. Okay, next one down, people. 8.
Right.
So that is the. Sorry. Okay. That's the walking festival.
And the wages, which is 14,000 for wages and
3,000 for the walking festival. That's right.
I should also note a conflict with that one as well, not because I've got any particular role with the Little River Wairua Community Trust, but because the Banks Peninsula Walking Festival is an activity of the Rod Donald Trust that I do have involvement with. So I'd better note a conflict there as well.
Thank you, Andrew.
Right. I think if you just call a number out in the name of the group.
Okay, so
ask them to speak up if they have any issues.
Okay, right. So that was number 8, and if there's no issues, we'll move on to number 9, which is the Ekaroa Community Arts Council, and the recommendation is 4.5, which does match the previous year. There's no change to that one. So 10 is Akaroa Heritage Festival Society.
Can we come back one, please?
Go back one. Sorry.
Yeah, just on the
Community Arts Council.
ACC, is that ACAC?
Yeah.
I didn't want the recommendation to increase it slightly on last year, Robin?
That was discussed at the, what's that mean, workshop? At the workshop. The recommendation, this is the recommendation last year, and the allocation was 4,500. Yes, so, and the other amount that was given towards this group was from Creative Communities, and that was for a slightly larger amount last year.
Okay.
So they got that in addition to this 4,500.
Increasing this
Yes,
amount.
so the board needs to discuss, that's what this meeting
is about. So are we looking at increasing that funding?
Who are you asking?
The board.
Oh, that's
Yeah, I think they do a fantastic job, and I'm just echoing your words from the last meeting we had, Robin, and they are very, very, very heavily involved in the community in all sorts of areas. So, yeah, I'd be happier to see that increase.
Right.
We could bump it up to 5.5, right? And it's halfway in between, almost.
Okay, so if we are all in agreement, moving that one up to 5.5.
There you go, it just changes.
So it shows us the
money in, money out.
Okay, so that's
that
one's that's one we can carry on if everyone's okay with that. We can carry on with the next one. Right, Heritage Festival Manager. Sorry, the screen's just jumping on me. Okay, next one is Community Watch Sumner, which is 11. That one is 560, and from what I understand, that's our part split with Littleton Central Heathcote.
Yeah.
Next one was the Diamond Harbour School bicycle court upgrade. So 12, and that's for $3,000. Was that one discussed also?
Yeah, I thought we wanted to get go up 4,000.
Yeah, that's what my recollection was. So if we put 4,000 on there, if everybody is in agreement with that. I just happened to be in Diamond Harbour at the weekend, and at the celebration of the Foursquare there, and he put along his own basketball hoop, which was very well liked. So whatever we can do to support basketball in the area.
Yeah, but let's just give them the money saving.
Yeah, having to find it from other pots of money, and it's a good asset for the school kids to use. So can we change that people to 4,000, please? So it does change what's left in the area. Okay, Nigel?
Yeah, just went past the French Festival one. I know I've got a conflict of interest, but has that changed? It's just a question, has it changed?
No, it's stayed what was recommended.
No, that's okay.
Okay. Next one is Harbour Youth and Community Trust.
Conflict.
9,000.
Just declare a conflict of interest there, Tori, for me.
Okay, thank you, Scott. I'm happy to take those throughout the way. Next one was the Kaituna Golf Club, volunteer expenses, power and maintenance. That was discussed, but I think we left that at 4,000. Next one is
hang on.
Sorry, yes.
I had problems with this previously, and I've got problems with it again now. And the fact that just reading this, it's a 70-member golf course. It's offering $6 green fees. Reading this, which is basically the price of a cup of coffee. A similar course like, say, Chartreuse Bay, which is just the similar sort of people, pay $25 green fees. They're not any richer or any poorer. I don't think the residents would really be keen on, it's only $4,000, but spending ratepayer money on a golf course. So I can't support this, sorry. What the rest of the community board think, I don't know, but I don't think it's a good idea spending public money on a golf course. I think that the green fees could be increased, money could be raised elsewhere. I just think it's a bad look for this community board.
If I could just make a clarification there, it's Jane here. Those $6 green fees are for when they run special programs to get women and to get young people into golfing. So they're their community programs. That's not what they charge for their green fees for the public or members to pay. That's just for when they're trying to increase participation of young people and women into the sport.
Special events.
Yeah. It is, yeah. It's not. No, they normally cover their costs through their green fees.
Okay, and notion here in your specification is that $4,000 was going towards volunteer recognition and volunteer expenses. So it's to actually help cover the volunteer costs that they put into that.
Yeah, and I understand. I was one that brought that up and changed it because I thought it'd make me feel a lot more comfortable presenting it to the community. But I just can't simply support a golf course with community funding. I don't believe it's a good use of community funding, so I'll have to stand off on that one and vote against it. Okay. How the rest of the community votes is up to them.
Yep, okay, so we'll note that Howard has declined that one. However, how does the rest of the board feel about that one?
Well, I remember this being very much a community exercise.
Yes, like a
in a voluntary sort of area. So
and they're trying to generate more people to use golf courses as a whole. Yeah. Community activation side of things. I'm in favour. So Nigel and Ruben, one is in favour. Tara, are you in favour of this one to carry on this $4,000?
Broadly, yeah.
Yep. And just raise your hands if you guys are in favour of this one. Yep.
Yeah, I'm comfortable. I'm comfortable with it.
Okay, we'll move on with the noting that Howard disagrees with this particular one. So no, thank you, Howard. We do understand, and we'll note that down. Next one is the Little River Craft Station Incorporated, which is information station 4,000. It's been fairly standard for the last few years. So happy. Long the board is happy for me to move on to the next one. No issues there. So item 16 is Te Mata Hapuku Community Hall with their activities, $2,000.
Birdlands Back.
Yeah, which is Birdlands Back. Okay, next one, no issues there. Next one is Littleton Information Centre, and that's for the Littleton Harbour Review, $5,000. Okay. No issues there. And the last one is Littleton Recreation Centre Trust, and that's $20,000 towards facility manager wages. There's no changes there. Okay, and the last one is Little River Play Centre, and it was discussed that it didn't fit the criteria in which the Spectrum Community Fund does pay for it, so that was a decline, and I do understand that they've been notified for those reasons. So if we are happy to approve what we've just gone through, that would mean the recommendation today would be a strengthened community fund spend of $153,171, leaving us a balance for DRF of $45,401. If we are all in agreement of that with those changes, I'll ask for a mover and seconder.
Sorry, how do we divvy out the conflicts?
It's been noted.
Right, so it's okay.
What you do, you can move it
as a whole.
As a whole, you move it in bulk, and you record that Howard voted against the grant to $20.
And note the conflicts of interest. Well,
conflicts of interest will all be written.
Yeah.
Right, so we're technically not voting for those things.
Yeah.
We don't need to take them all.
Well, if we're going to go through one after the other, it'll be a long. As our group that we've come to the conclusion.
We're good.
Yep. Okay, so I'll get a mover, please. So Ruben's happy to move. Tyron's happy to second. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That's carried. Thank you to staff and everybody. This I know the strengthening communities grant round does take a lot of time and effort, and we do appreciate everything you've put in the background. To thank you.
Yeah, no,
Okay,
look,
next one. Well, we've got staff on the screen, guys. Thank you. Item 11, DRF.
On the next one.
Yep. Okay, so we'll go straight on to DRF. We've got a couple there.
Yes, these are the two board projects that the board requested be put forward for a decision on funding at a workshop recently and at the board, the last board meeting or previous board meeting. So it's as discussed, $1,000 towards Anzac Day wreaths and Diamond Harbour grant, and the Summer with Your Neighbours, $3,000 towards that project.
Yeah. So as noted in the past, and I will raise again now that because this has come from strengthening communities, the Summer with Your Neighbours, we had such a good such good uptake of it last year that we did increase that fund when we had so many communities put their hand up to partake in it. So that has still got that flexibility should we have more than what we put aside come in. So at this stage it's just for $3,000. Keep in mind we can up it later. So any questions of staff before we move the resolution? No, this one's all fairly straightforward. So I'll ask for a mover and a seconder, please.
Move.
So Nigel first. Nigel move. Tyrone seconded. All those in favour? Right. That is carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, team. We appreciate it. A lot of hard work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Next, we move on to the area report. Now, there's quite a bit in this area report this month because there's lots been going on. So, Penelope, anything you want to raise?
Look, thank you, Tori. I'd just like to highlight the one note in there about the weather events and how much work that staff right through the council, but particularly our team, did locally, connecting with communities. That was even mentioned in one of the public forums this morning, which was nice to hear. Some appreciation of. There are a lot of attachments in there of advice that's come your way. So happy to take any questions or comments.
I'd say that I've had nothing but positive feedback.
Lovely.
From people over the base.
Nice.
Even Dr. Miller, who can't access his house, he's living somewhere else at the moment. He says the council has been fantastic.
Okay. Any questions regarding the area report? We have got it there.
Well, given the deputation this morning from Civic Trust, and that that there is an item noted in here about traffic management plans and all that sort of stuff for Akaroa. Are we all super comfortable that everything's going to happen in a seamless and positive way during the summer when cruise ships arrive? Because I'm not feeling it, eh?
I've been saying for 2 years now.
Yeah. Because we've got staff saying, oh no, it's all good, it's all allowed, it's all legal, but then we've got community people saying it's not working for us.
I think the fear is returning to what we had in the height of the cruise ship seasons that we've had prior to lockdowns is still in people's minds, and I think there is fearful of repeating. However, I also understand that this first season coming out of COVID is going to look a little different, and we need to be flexible and amicable as to what that evolves into. Having this inundation of buses, people, stuff, rubbish, toilets, all that kind of thing, I don't think anyone wants to repeat it. And in the previous board, we were hit with that constantly, that things were not okay. I don't think anyone wants to go back there. I think, as staff have said, we can put things in place at the moment for what we see may happen, but it needs to evolve. So it needs to be checked regularly that it is working. It needs to be re-evaluated regularly to see that what is and isn't working. I think the photos we've received, we already had 30 or 40 buses waiting to take passengers off the ship. From what I understand, it is not going to look like 30 or 40 buses each day. But what does it look like? I think it's just going to be a moving.
Can I just say something there?
Yeah.
I had a conversation with several of the neighbours up here. With the, I don't know, going through the Giants house about the buses and the park, they park there and they idle. You know, you would have heard it all before, and listen, they aren't cruise boat buses. The very few.
No,
cruise
I
boat
think
buses. There is other buses coming over the national tours.
I understand that, Nigel, but I think that is different to having buses parked along in front of City Park and that kind of thing. That is a different area that needs to be looked at. I think that issue still needs to be addressed.
Yes.
I'm not saying that that is not an issue, because trying to get big buses up a residential road may not be appropriate, but we're talking about on a whole traffic management through Akaroa. I think there's lots of things going on here, and I don't think
There are lots of things, but we pretty much know what that looks like. We know what that's like. We know there might be the odd bus or vehicle turn up and pick up people coming off the small numbers where there's an average of 500 people. We do know that there's other buses going to come over, and that's why we need to know where they're going, what they want to do, to get the gauge of that. That information's there because they're booking these tours. It's a matter of getting that out of the tour companies. And have a park and ride option. It doesn't have, it won't fit all, but it could be a bit of time for a bit of an experiment. That's all. I think that's the voice I'm hearing. So.
Okay, so Tyrone, you raised this first before I butted in, and noted butted in. So what is it?
I just butted in. It's probably the wrong thing. It's something that we need to talk. It's something that we need to talk about.
It's really, really hard on the Zoom and on the live stream if more than one person speaks.
Yep, thanks, Liz. Yep. So I'm just really worried that, like, despite all the assurances, we're just going to end up in the same situation this time next year that we are at the moment, where the community feels like it hasn't been listened to. And I'm just wondering, you know, like how because a lot of it's just about sort of relationships, isn't it? Like, you know, who has the conversation with the tour companies to say, look, I know you guys are doing a job, but like it's upsetting people, and you know, maybe we can come to an arrangement. Like, who has those conversations? Do we need to get out there as a scrum? Well, have those conversations.
And that's the whole point of being transparent about going into pre-tourist season and post-tourist season. So in the past, we have had meetings where we've had traffic and police and a few others, and to say what the plans are for the coming up season, and then re-evaluating what has happened in that season, what are the good and bad bits, because we had those clashes with other events and water shortages and that kind of thing. So I think ongoing is having a meeting around what is the post for the coming season and what are things in place. Water use is another one, and what is the evaluation going to look like? Is it going to be open to have that feedback from the community, what worked, what didn't work, that feedback from police, staff, emergency services, what does that look like? So I think we do need to have on an ongoing basis, especially for Akaroa, because of the resources and everything that happened here that we know about. We need a pre-influx season, summer season, for want of better words, and a post-tourist summer season wrap up as to what worked, didn't work. And I think at those points you need to reevaluate, are we on the right track?
Guys, can I say something? My hand's raised.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to get there, and we're just sort
Sorry.
of, yeah. I see that 3 hands are raised at the moment.
Thank
so,
you.
yeah. Okay, Jamie.
Oh, thank you. I'd like to bring some perspective to this conversation and challenge a few of the speakers that we've had today, and also who they represent. Now, this might be an unpopular view. It might be a popular view, but the Akaroa Civic Trust represent the Akaroa Civic Trust. They don't represent the whole of the Akaroa community. I think we need to also be cautious of they are representing themselves. Also, the Akaroa Residents and Ratepayers Association seems to be one person with a view on certain things that I certainly don't believe reflects the whole community. And to see articles in stuff today where the Akaroa Residents and Ratepayers Association was quoted as saying that 90% of the Akaroa community want buses banned from Akaroa is not factually correct. I would argue that is 90% of the people that chose to respond to a very undemocratically worded and misleading survey is what they're quoting. And I think we need to be very careful. And I'm going to put my local Akaroa businessman's hat on here and say that I'm sick to death of this kind of conversation. We need to be welcoming of these people. This constant media beat up that is just saying, we don't want you here, we don't want buses here, we want to welcome these people to Akaroa. The number of buses coming to Akaroa is going to be minimal. The photos that are dragged out every time these people present are the same photos taken of the same intersection of one time that happened in Akaroa, and there's since been traffic management systems put in place. You can hear my frustration, but I feel I can't stay quiet and listen to a very one-sided view of what's being proposed. And I just want to, say my piece on that. It's very easy to take these two groups as being representative of the whole of the Akaroa community when they're simply not. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. I appreciate that. I'm going to go through Nigel because we've got others on the screen, the big screen as well at the moment. I'll come back to Nigel. So Scott, then Andrew, then Nigel.
Yeah, a few things. Firstly, on the 8th of June, we're requesting an update from Christchurch NZ. Do we have a time frame for that, staff?
This afternoon.
This afternoon.
Yep, this afternoon.
Oh, that's that one. Okay, so sweet. Pen, you said about the severe weather events, and there's some information in your report. I've actually been contacted by a few people around the bays, just wondering who they contact re some slips and some damage that's happened during those severe weather events. They just want to know the time frame, the slips outside their properties and things like that. So who would be the best contact for that?
Well, that's the standard CSR system. So SNAPS in Solve, or council, at the 8999 number, or else the email info@council, info@CCC. So my team isn't replacing, getting things fixed and getting things done. They were focusing on passing through local intelligence about what was happening in the communities, and particularly with an eye on welfare issues. I
appreciate that. It's more that they have snaps in solved these slips, and they have been cleaned up, and the snaps in solved have been closed. However, there's big chunks of holes missing above their properties or below their properties. So just tell them to go through council. No, that's cool. All right. Thank you.
That's the same. Thanks, Scott.
Okay, thanks, Scott. Andrew?
Thank you, Tori. So I was going to update on this during the members' information exchange, but given that we're having the discussion now, it seems appropriate to raise these things. So there was a meeting recently at Turanga that a number of us had the opportunity to attend, where a number of different agencies and organisations were represented, and there was a broad-ranging discussion about crews in both Littleton and Akaroa. But there we discussed bus parking, what was appropriate and what wasn't, the movement of buses through the town, reducing the congestion and the negative amenity caused by parking of large buses. I've also, on the back of an email I received from Victoria Andrews and a subsequent email from Mike Norris, met with staff about the proliferation of temporary signage, so the issue that Mike raised this morning, and what alternatives to that might look like. The destination management plan, of course, also has got effect in this space. And that will form part of Harry's meeting on the 28th, as he'd said. So I'm going to be at that meeting. The Mayor will be at that meeting. The Chief Executive of Christchurch NZ will be at that meeting. And I think that shows the level of importance that we're attaching to these issues that Harry is raising. I think we need to bear in mind that there are going to be a lot less ships than we've seen in past years. 18 of them, as I understand it, only 2 of which will have over 1,000 passengers. But clearly, as we heard this morning, there is some fear on the part of some community members that that's just the beginning and that number will increase. We need to do what we can to take control of this while we can and genuinely partner with the community. And, you know, taking other points that have been made, the whole community, to work out what the community appetite is, and to work out what the social license to operate is, and then plan within that context. But, you know, looking at cruise in the context of other visitation, the social license to operate might be greater and the community appetite might be greater in October or April, shoulder seasons when it can be pretty quiet, than it is on, for example, Boxing Day or New Year's Eve or New Year's Day. And they're the kind of conversations that I'm hoping the destination management planning work's going to tease out. But I mean, I guess my question is, when's our opportunity to discuss this properly? Is it this afternoon in the briefing session? And then there's a follow-up question comes from that, which again picks up the issues raised in the briefing and some of the email correspondence I've had, realizing that that's a community group and a number of individuals that are corresponding. But I think it's fair to expect that the community will be able to have the confidence that this is being discussed properly, and that the matters that they're asking for us to raise are actually being raised and are being discussed, and it would be good for them to know the outcomes of those discussions. But is all of that this afternoon, or is it a different opportunity that we need to create or that's coming up?
I suspect you'll need to create a different opportunity.
Yeah, because the Christchurch NZ work's only a part of it. The traffic planning and the parking and the things that the community board actually has got a bit more skin in the game over, or should have. We probably need to talk this afternoon about the other things the community board wants to get into and when we can talk about that. And the sooner the better, because this will be upon us before we know it.
Yes, I agree. Liz?
Yeah, can I just say in regards to the memo that's come back from staff, if there is things in there that the board doesn't think have been covered from its previous request for information, then you're going to ask for more information, but obviously probably need to be specific about what you don't think has been covered. Staff, I know staff have done a lot of background work on this, and they've also still said basically they're going to keep monitoring. Because it is quite unknown for this year. But if there are things we don't think have been released, then we need to know so that we can pass that on and they can come back with that.
So did you hear that, Andrew?
Yes, I did.
Okay. So I think that comes back to almost what I was saying to Tyrone before, is having that almost open meeting. What does summer season impact on the area look like? It's not just traffic management though, it's have we got things in place that we don't want repeated when we've got lots of like staff shortages right on Labour weekend and rubbish bins not getting emptied like it's done for the last couple of years, toilets being cleaned, those kind of visitor impacts. And as Jamie was saying, it's making the experience better for everybody, not just one group or another, but making sure that things covered. Because the other thing that's in the back of my mind is those events that are still, what are they looking like going forward with those added constraints? So when we have I assume is happening, I haven't heard anything, the swim season, what does that look like on cruise ship day crossovers, that kind of thing? Because if you're having 8 or 10 buses coming over from Littleton, plus also the area is well populated because it is in the height of the summer season, as well as having those big events come in, what impacts are those? So I think that needs to come into that bigger discussion of what does the summer season look like and what do we need to be prepared for, or here are the ongoing concerns.
Nigel wants to say something.
Jamie, I absolutely agree. This is about everybody and a good, strong economy. I just want to say, this is really coming back to what these submissions were this morning, was about the lack of communication and lack of on the ground stuff. I think, look, we want the experience to be great. We want the experience to be great for the tourists. We get a win-win here.
Yeah.
It's about a win-win. It's about improving the situation, continuous improvement. It's not about no passes, but it's just about managing the resource we have to manage. So I think
Okay.
the destination management plan.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody's speaking sensibly. I guess, yeah, there's plenty of scope for a harmonious resolution to all the concerns and different points of view. I just want to make sure that, you know, so these do get raised. Our role is as a voice for the community through the council processes, and yeah, it's just about making sure that people don't feel like we haven't heard it and that we haven't had a discussion, because, you know, just keep talking. Yeah. Comms.
Yeah,
it's all good.
That's it. The comms.
Okay.
What I said when I left that meeting.
So is there anything else? I'm just aware of time, and I know there's people that want to share in members exchange. Is there anything else we'd like to raise within the area report, or have questions of staff to the area report? Like I said, there's quite a few attachments and memos and other things. And big acknowledgements to the staff over July. It was a particularly full-on month, and I even heard the other day that some staff were dealing with some of these issues, especially in land drainage, while at home with influenza. That's so staff have gone above and beyond over the last month, especially in light of what has been happening. So if there's nothing else, I'd like to I'm happy to move that we receive the area report. Can I ask for a seconder, please? So that's Ruben has seconded. So for the discussion, all those in favour?
Aye.
It's carried, thank you. Right, we have got 15 minutes. So Tyrone, I'll start in the room. So Tyrone Howard.
I'm a bit worried, actually, just about the various discussions that are happening about within the reserve space in Littleton, that there is an increasing risk that things will get I don't know, like I'm just feeling like there's a lot of general discomfort for lots of different people for lots of different reasons, and I feel like that we need to get on top of that before it really gets out of control. You know, like I absolutely acknowledge all the people that do work in the reserves around Littleton and Cass Bay, but there are so many divergent views and wants and needs. I'm talking about perceived fire risk in Uramo. I'm talking about the execution of the landscape plan for Steadfast. There's just you know, it's not in a healthy space in my view, and I'm not quite sure what we need to do about it, but we need to do something to prevent any confrontational things happening. So that'll be for one. So are we expecting Paul to come back on, or anybody to come back talking about the sort of the management of fire risks out the back of Foster Terrace with Uramo?
There was that report, you know, that done by FENS, I believe, and there were recommendations in there to be carried out, and I thought that staff would proceed with carrying those out.
As I speak now, there is a widespread perception that hasn't been carried out.
Has it been?
Yeah.
So we can ask staff to give an update frequently before the fire season.
Yeah.
On what is happening with that.
I think people are really worried. They're seeing what's happening all around the world, and you know, there's an increasing concern there. I'll just pass it on to Howard for now. Yep.
Howard.
I've got one good and bad, actually. One bitch and one positive. You would have all read my email about visitor centre. I must admit, I'm rather disappointed with the response. There's been none. For this city to say that there's no visitor centre over the winter, I think is absolutely atrocious. It is good that it's going to come in October, assuming the building opens on time and there are no building delays or anything like that. So where we go from here, all we can do is hope that the information centres do actually arrive. For visitors to arrive in this city and not be able to go to events, go to anything because they can't find out them is a concern. And for the positive, mainly aimed at non-Aotearoa residents, just to stir it. Littleton Harbour Basin, I'd like everyone to just be reminded about the Creasy Trust. It supports everyone over 65. If you have a need like firewood, dentist, ear pieces, the trust is there to help the residents who live in the Harbour Basin, Littleton Harbour Basin, with any expenses. All they've got to do is apply. And I'd like everyone to recommend it to their residents. Yeah.
Okay. Andrew.
Thank you. Not too much. I'm going out to Little Akaloa with staff on Friday this morning, Friday morning this week, to talk about flooding issues and the recent rain events and how that's affected Little Akaloa. I'm running exactly the same process I did when I went out to the bays in January after the December event. I'm going out there with staff so that I'm well informed, well supported, and we can have proper discussions about what is able to happen rather than going out there on my own on what might be seen as more of a handshaking exercise. I am obviously subject to quite a bit of correspondence about the flooding and the rain events. There are some concerns, some of which are an overhang from what happened in December. Goffs Bay would be an example of that. But certainly people are very aware of how intense these rainfall events are, how frequent they are, and how remote some of these communities are. So, you know, I guess December was kind of the beginning of a concern that continues to be elevated, and we're seeing that. But yeah, I'll be out at Little Akaloa Friday morning to pick up the conversations there. In a similar vein, and others might raise this as well, a particularly good meeting on flooding in Little River a couple of Sundays ago. A really good collaborative approach across a number of agencies, so City Council, Environment Canterbury, the local Wairewa Runanga, and obviously a community group that are highly energised, highly motivated and highly capable, that are really going to lead some work in that space with the other agencies on board. So that's great. I facilitated, I think is the right word, a meeting at Steadfast on Friday morning, a freezing cold morning and a freezing cold meeting, which made very clear that there is a need for a warm, dry community meeting space there. I don't know whether that was the intention in choosing that venue or not, but it certainly worked. Took me about half a day to thaw out after that when I finally got away. And it was interesting that we chose what I think might have been the coldest morning of the year to do it. So all of that worked perfectly. But there was progress on getting a building report on the former garage building, which council will pay for. Progress on getting the MOU between the groups using the site concluded, getting it signed. And some really good discussions on what opportunities there might be or not to be sharing facilities. And I guess at a high level, finding the right balance between the heritage aspects of the site, the biodiversity opportunities, the recreation opportunities of the reserve management plan or the reserve development plan, which of course was consulted with the community and consistency with that. And obviously Steadfast's use of the site for naval training, and there various outcomes that they're looking for as well. So it was a good discussion. There's more work to do, but I did feel quite positive as we left that we'd had a good discussion about a number of the issues and we'd lifted some of those key points up, and there were some actions coming out of it that will progress things. So I'd just like to reflect, as I said on Friday morning, my appreciation of all the work that was done preparing for that meeting. The number of staff that were there, I think, showed how important the matter is to us and how we do want to get it resolved. But equally, the number of community members there and the way that they prepared for the meeting shows that there's a huge amount of passion in that community for getting a result as well. So thank you to everybody involved. Cruise ships I've already talked about. And I think that might be it, actually. Yep, we'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Since Jamie's a bit busy at the moment, I'll go to Scott, then go back to Jamie. Scott?
Kia ora. Yeah, it's been a busy time for all. As Tori mentioned, the representation of the community residents down at the yearly opening of Foursquare was pretty awesome, eh? 2,000 people, they reckon, by the end of the day had gone through there for a free sausage and a bit of b-ball or some recycled clothing. So it was really good to see, and there was a lot of discussion about the disposal of Hunters Road and the community wishes and plans for that. Tyrone brings up a good point about fire risk management, and I know I spoke to Paul a few weeks back. We had a meeting about fire risk management, and I guess it's no longer their role; it's a FENS thing, but he kind of suggests that I think perhaps the community board should actually lead those discussions, or at least get some of the community residents and associations together so they can all provide some information to FENS, i.e. tracks that are accessible if there's a fire, best water sources, where gates are, all good information that would help to form a risk management plan for things if there was a fire throughout the peninsula. So I'm not really sure how to go about it, but I really think that it's a good initiative that this community board should probably encourage those discussions, or at least, or even if they could, lead them. So I'm not sure how to go about that, Tori, but yeah. It's no longer the parks issue. It is a FENS thing. They no longer run it, and it is run by volunteers throughout the peninsula, and they don't really have the time or the energy to lead the conversations. So I think it should come from the community board as a collective.
Yeah.
That's it for me.
Thanks, Scott. I think that is an ongoing discussion to have how we can help.
I hear that a lot, though. Oh, it is. The wheels are in motion, or there's ongoing discussions. But talking to a lot of the communities throughout the base here, no one really knows of any discussions happening, and Paul wasn't aware of any except for in Littleton. Yet it is a lot of the community's desire to get them underway. So yeah, I'm not sure how to push it, but I think it should come from the.
Like you say, the volunteer fire brigades are limited in their capacity of what they can do to help the community. It's, I guess, a FENS bigger picture, and the fact that if they want support from locals, I know they've got material regarding how to take care of your own patch, as in how to have the low flammable plantings around your property and the high flammable, plantings chopped back, taken care of, because it's about us taking care of our patch and then helping council, whatever, take care of the reserves and bigger picture. We can't just put it all onto one person or another, but it's also how to get that messaging out, because it is so
that being said, Tori, would it not be a good idea to, like you say, your own patch, encourage, have FENS come up with a list of things that would help them if there was a fire, like discuss, where there are tracks that they can get a vehicle, where there are tracks they can't, gates,
it's
water source.
yeah, making sure that you don't have that overhang over your driveway, as in they can't get a fire appliance up from the driveways because they're going to keep past the tree that your car gets past because your truck can't get up there. But that's the getting information out. But as you said, the volunteers of the fire brigades are limited in their capacity because they're busy, you know, helping our car crashes and our medical events and haven't got time. So
you could include a list of, you know, if there was some good information from Ben's, that could be included in the next board newsletter.
Yeah.
For example, I also wonder, because fire is one of the hazards, it's one of the risks across with everything else, flooding and earthquakes and inundation and what have you.
Yeah.
That it should be part of any good resilience, community resilience planning. And I know that it's not just going to, you know, provide what you are thinking of in terms of the fire focus right now, but I would expect as the staff, thinking of the civil defence and emergency management staff, working with the communities, the settlements and doing that resilience planning, and preparedness, that fire would be one of those aspects of that. But, you know, we're not resourced to do everything all at once. Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess, as Penelope was saying, sharing those links about the easy things that we can do as property owners ourselves to make sure we are taking care of it. But like I say, it's getting that word out and perhaps linking back to fire emergency websites for people to read more. So, yeah, having that in the newsletter or, you know, comms from whether it comes from the community board or whether it comes from CCC, going into, we can only hope it's not a incredibly dry, hot season, but we watch what other weather events happen overseas. We can start thinking about it now and help that conversation. Like I say, we've all got limited capacity, but what can we do to help? And I think what Penelope was saying is putting some links in or information, you know, bullet points in our comms out to the community, because we have actually got a lot of emails that we can drop information to inboxes so people can actually see and start the process and have that conversation with their neighbour.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Dory.
Okay, thanks, Scott. Okay, Jamie, I'm aware of time. I've got a few things to share too. Jamie?
I'm good. Thank you.
You're good. Okay, Nigel?
Yep. Mitigation and flood management. I thought it was a really great hui. I'm picking up on segueing off you, Andrew, to sit in that room and hear that pretty much there was a pretty common agreement around the bridge issue being a bit of a dam. And I was just wondering why that hasn't maybe come up before, but maybe because there's more water coming out of the sky with this global warming. I had a look at the bridge down here beside the tennis courts, and they had the same problem there. It's actually gouged a whole track out of the road, and had some conversations with some people, neighbours down there, and it is actually, they believe it actually is too low now. It's creating a dam effect in a severe flood event. So maybe some work being done around understanding those rural bridges going forward and all of those areas, because it's an issue there and it's an issue down there. And flowing on from that, had some discussion with Paddy, got him down to have a look at some issues down by the bowling green, which has always been a flood zone, and the U Cottage again coming up, getting wet feet, and really the answer is going to come back from a retired engineer, one of your favourites, Andrew, about maybe lifting the car park up. Don't seal it until it's lifted up about 400 or 500, and taking that level through and raising it again slightly under U Cottage and around onto Jolly Street, creating an area that it can gutter down into a decent gutter and gutter it out, because that pipe capacity is probably one of the major issues. So I don't know how we progress that, but it opens up a bigger conversation, I believe, that sort of came out of that hui. That's me.
Thanks, Michael. Ruben?
Yeah, very quickly, just to echo the other members' points on reserves. I'm hearing exactly that same feedback in and around Littleton from people. So yeah, fires, floods, and just general engagement with the committees that are there to manage those, or govern those. The other thing, I've had a number of confused people talk to me, or people who are confused about Godly House and what we're actually doing on it as a board versus what we might be doing on it as individuals. So there's some people have said to me, I hear the board's building a new building in Diamond Harbour, and I'm like, oh, crikey, are we? Didn't think we quite had that in the DRE. But I just wonder whether there's a, I don't know, whether we need to take some steps there to articulate our position, but also to protect members from being looking like we're committing or promising to things in that space. Boy races is coming through loud and clear, both in feedback and at antisocial hours of the day and night for residents all around the harbour. So that doesn't seem to have gone away. And I guess that's just an ongoing issue we have to continue to do whatever we can on. And the one piece of positive feedback has been that there's way less, or a perceived decrease in graffiti and tagging around, and the report would back that up as well. So that's kind of what I'm getting on the phones and emails, occasionally in bold caps.
Can I just say, if the board has the money and the willingness to build Godly House, please do.
We might need to add a few more zeros to our DRF budget.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So thank you for that, Ruben. I've got a few to update on. So yes, regarding the flooding hui, I've had residents come back to me since then that weren't able to be at the meeting, and there were people that were at that flooding hui. That is there any notes available from that meeting for the people that weren't there and the people that were there, what the follow-up looks like? So
there will be, and they'll be out by the end of the week, hopefully.
Perfect. Because I'd love to know what the next phases look like, all that kind of thing. So that was a good meeting, and well attended. I mean, for a small community, having 60 odd people in a room on a Sunday afternoon was impressive. Diamond Harbour Wharf delays. So the feedback that I did go to that meeting, happened to miss the wharf actually briefing of the meeting over in Diamond Harbour because I was stuck in a traffic jam because a local had crashed their car across the road, which had closed the road for almost an hour. But the feedback that I think everyone's receiving is that doing bulk of the work after the busy summer season is going to be good, and the fact that it still leaves residents a chance to jump off the wharf as they like to do in summer. You know, it's not going to impact on the summer use. So doing the bulk of the work post summer is everyone's quite happy with. Cruise meeting. Big thing that I took from that one is increased communication. How we get out this information to the community is important. And I guess that's what I got out of it, is that communication is a big thing. Case Bay Museum AGM, look, they've got some fantastic aspirations, and I look forward to seeing their next phase of what's going on in Cairns Bay. And the last one is Keep Christchurch Federal had their awards ceremony Thursday night, and local got an award for different things that they've been doing in the community. So hey, it's acknowledging those volunteers that do put in the hard work and do make the place that little bit better. It's good to acknowledge them from time to time, whether it be just a simple award and a thank you or whatever we can do. That was great to see. So on that note, I think we can close.
Sorry, can I just touch on one thing that you raised and Nigel did as well, just on Little River hui there. So like the overall, there are lots of different opinions about what the issues were and lots of solutions put up, but like the overwhelming sense that I get from the community is that everyone's like completely over it. That's the really strong feedback. And so I'm just, I suppose this is probably a question for you, Pen. Like, what can we be really clear on what the next steps? I know that you raised that, Tori. Like, what the next steps are. Like, what's the thing that we need to do as a board? What's the one thing that we can do that can actually drive forward towards a, because the solution isn't just one thing. It's lots of things. It could be some swales. It could be some.
As I mentioned at that hui, The river ratings have done massive improvements since.
It could be a targeted rate. Yeah.
That's already in place. The next thing that I'm aware of that we need to see how that improves going on is that land drainage work in behind the shops and that main street. So what does that look like, and what does that impact look like after it's done? So that's meant to start, from what I understand, next month, Penelope, if that's still going ahead. So making sure that somebody else said, look, can we make sure that does go ahead, because we know there's been delays up until this point. But from what I understand, once the tender goes in, therefore contracts have been signed, therefore you've got a certain time frame to deliver that contract. So once that work's gone in, what does the next pinch point look like, and that ongoing remedial work needs to be done? I don't think we can go speculating that, oh, this needs to be done, because we haven't done that next piece of the puzzle yet to fill in what the follow-on piece is. The bridge, to answer Nigel's question, it was looked at years ago. It is a multi-million-dollar job to raise, widen, whatever, a bridge. It is not a quick fix. We're looking at what we can fix straight away to relieve the pressure, but what that's doing is taking that water down faster to those pinch points.
I can answer a little bit of that. It's Jane here. So Tyrone, I had a meeting with staff from Cannon Council on the Monday after the hui, and we discussed the things that were discussed in the meeting and where the next points of action should be. So what came out of that meeting was Jill Jenkins from ECAN. The thing that they need to do is get the community to agree to continue the targeted rate and go out and do the consultation, which is due now. If the community agrees to continuation of the targeted rate, there's about 3 projects that they have on their list that they can start working on that will further improve the mitigation. So that's the answer to that question, and that can be quite immediate. In terms of the more complex work, talking with staff, one of the big issues is that the levels of service that the managers around the drainage and roading, Three Waters people, if a place floods once a year for less than half a day and only one perhaps or no houses are inundated, it doesn't meet the levels of service to use existing funds. So what will need to happen is that there will need to be quite a collective effort from the trust, the Runanga and council staff and the community board to probably actually go to council with a submission about the effects of the flooding and the need. And what was identified as the key need is to investigate whether doing something to the bridge and what aspect of doing things to the bridge will actually make a real difference. Obviously, no one wants council to spend tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars on something that then doesn't alleviate the problem. So that's what's been identified as the initial steps to take. In terms of the drainage project, that's actually already started, but the most of the work will happen in October, November this year. That will definitely help the movement of water and some of the localized flooding. However, it will more efficiently move more water into the river. So if the river coming to Kinloch Bridge is causing the problem, then that's not necessarily going to fix. In fact, it might exacerbate the problem, but it's very, very necessary drainage repairs and renewals that needed to be done, and that the trust has previously advocated strongly for and got into the long-term plan and the annual plan. So that might answer some of the things you were just talking about.
Thanks, Jane. And can I just say what a fantastic job you did of facilitating that meeting. It was a really nice one to be at. So that's cool. That's cool. I guess probably what's just churning around in my head is like, are we confident that the right mechanism's there? Because it's just such a multi-stakeholder thing, right? It's like all these different groups, we've got all these different bits to the puzzle. Are we confident that the mechanism's in place just to make sure all those things kind of fit together? Like, are we? I mean, if we are, then that's great. Like, I mean, that's just, you know, that's just my concern.
So to me, this also, sorry, I'm kind of talking regarding what Jane was saying. We raised, I think, I'm not sure if Andrew was part of the group, but the rural roading working group also flagged with council the need for increased money to put on budget for weather events. Because weather events are happening more and more frequently, and maintenance teams, as James just said, only put aside a certain amount each year to spend on weather events. Because weather events are happening far more frequently, there's not enough put on budget. So that comes back to LTP stuff, needs to be put aside for weather events. Yes, when it comes to roading network, that's covered by NZTA, but only 75% is covered by NZTA. The rest of the event has to be covered by out of council budget, so therefore they're taken out of other things. Same with flooding, they only have a certain amount of money each year to put aside for flooding events. But if we're getting 3 in 1 month, that's nowhere near the budget that they need to deal with weather events. So Andrew, do you know what I'm talking about here when I say about the rural roading? And we've already flagged it, and Liz was in the room as well, that budgets need to be increased for those bigger capacities in maintenance budgets, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, that was something we talked about some time ago. It was the big slip and the flooding issues and the land drainage issues at Charteris Bay. One of the things I think for me put this on the agenda, and then the conversation about more capital into roading renewals versus how that how maintenance budgets and other budgets can be eroded when we have weather events or it changes the priorities. So I do recall it. And it was one of the things we did talk about as part of that rural roading working party, or that subgroup that we set up a couple of years ago, 3-4 years ago. I mean, I guess it's either an annual plan or long-term plan submission issue, or it's about reprioritizing within existing budgets, or reprioritizing better within existing budgets, or having a fund to go to for reactive repairs so that that doesn't impact on renewals and other planned work.
Yeah, so that to me is the same conversation regarding flooding. Even though it's different teams, it's that same conversation about increasing funding to the teams for their maintenance, because maintenance is being hammered because there's not enough money for these weather events that are happening far more often than it's been budgeted for. It makes sense. So both flooding and roading are being affected by those weather events.
So the board, as part of your long-term plan submission, you advocated for an increase in roading maintenance, and that was
accepted because we had a dollar figure on that, and that worked really well
in that space. Yeah.
But it's that was for maintenance of ongoing roads, which has been great and has been well felt throughout the rural area. It's these weather events that are having the impact on council budgets, but on that reactivity and therefore on staff time, on resources, and therefore pinching in other places. So I don't have an answer, but I think that everybody needs to. Yeah, and even we need to flag with council put on their wish list that they need to increase budgets for weather events, or
I'll have to dispute your comment that the roading maintenance has been well felt. It hasn't been felt around Diamond Harbour.
Rural roads. I'm talking about the gravel roads that we increased the budget.
Okay.
And since we increased that budget, the rural roads have had more attention and maintenance being put on that. So that was specifically targeted.
Shingle roads, yeah. Okay, not the main roads. Okay.
No, that's a different budget, different team, different kettle of fish we need to keep stirring.
I mean, sorry, just one more. So at the risk of, I know I'm being a monument to a pain in the backside at the moment, but I just want to make sure that we are absolutely sure that this board's done everything it possibly can to, and I'm just spitballing here, because otherwise where else are we going to nut this out? Is there an idea that we're kind of missing that where we could progress it like a really good coordinated solution for that thing, rather than leave it to the devices of the various agencies and not lining up? Can we, for example, in an annual plan submission, say, oh, we would really like someone to project manage this, for example?
Yeah,
because it's that important.
Do some Pareto analysis around it. I think it's bang for your buck.
But it's also bringing those, as we talked about at the meeting, bringing those extra groups in on board. So it's having those conversations. So Gillian, I'm actually in a meeting with this afternoon, and also the Water Zone Committee have a role as well. So it's bringing those groups, and as Jane alluded to, she has started those conversations with having all the groups together, not just going.
It's not just a council problem, right?
Yeah, no.
It's an everybody problem.
Yeah, so
And-
again, I can add a bit of clarification there. Before the hui, I talked to each of the various groups that were there, and a glaring omission is NZTA, and there's a number of reasons for that. But everybody else, so the Water Zone Committee, the Ratings River District Committee, Liaison Committee, ECAN, our people, the Runanga, the Little River Trust, and the Community Board, to say that there was a willingness to meet around a table, not set up a new group necessarily, but to sit on a reasonably regular basis around the table with community representation to have those discussions, Tyrone, that you're talking about. So that has been agreed to.
Thank you. That's the nub, exactly the nub that. Thank you. That's awesome feedback.
It's what the
Appreciate that.
community's been asking for. They say,
Yeah.
instead of talking to everyone separately, they'd like to be able to talk to everyone. So there's quite a lot of work in terms of getting that ready and preparing the
Yeah, I'll shut up
community.
now. Sorry.
Because the community will need some people to commit to quite a large amount of time and effort into it, but there's definitely a willingness, and that willingness was communicated before the hui.
Awesome. Thank you, Jane. Appreciate that. And thank you for
So
humouring me.
That note, we do need to wrap up the meeting. So I'll get Ribbon to close with the catechesis.
Kia whakaaria te tapu, kia wātia ai te ara, kia turu ki whakataha ai, kia turu ki whakataha ai. Haumi e